I'm missing football. I haven't seen any college football for, it's been about 4 days now. And we're not going to have any this weekend, aside from, of course, in some respects, the most important college football game of the season coming up this Saturday. So all due respect goes to Army versus Navy. But for the first time since late in August, not a complete college football Saturday coming up this weekend. And then it will be 1 week from tomorrow, Friday, that all the bowl games start to roll. We've got 2 bowl games coming up on December 17th, which is a week from tomorrow. And then on Saturday, I was just looking at the schedule today as we were preparing to preview all the bowl games. And you're going to see those videos released here very soon. Next Saturday, December 18th, 7 bowl games. I think the typical schedule for that first Saturday of bowl games, which is usually around the 15th to the 20th, something in that range, is 4, maybe 5 bowl games. They loaded up with 7 bowl games on that first Saturday. And we will track them all and be right here at the Voice of College Football next Saturday with bowl coverage. Can't miss those. We've got a litany of interesting bowl names. We could do a show just on bowl names and sponsor names. And we'll start to delve into those next Friday, of course, again, with 2 games headed up by the Bahamas Bowl and whomever is sponsoring the Bahamas Bowl. We'll check out the sponsors here tonight. We'll look at the sponsors and maybe have a vote on most interesting, oddest, strangest, weirdest sponsor. All right, welcome into the Voice of College Football. Great to have all of you. Appreciate your patience. I was a few minutes late because we were recording an Iowa State preview as the Cyclones take on Clemson in the Cheez-It Bowl. And right before that, some Michigan talk with our guy, Justin Rowe. As Michigan, let's see, it's Iowa State, Clemson in the Cheez-It Bowl. Important game there. Don't necessarily recall who Michigan's playing. They're playing in some obscure game that I don't know. Maybe somebody can fill me in on that one. All right, maybe the most important game in Michigan football since... Let's get to the news of the day here briefly before we get to the phone lines, because the phone lines are open, and I will post the number in just a second, 860-499-3332. 860-499-3332. I will post the number in just a second. So I'm looking down the ESPN college football headlines, and according to their sources, Chip Kelly and Oregon could possibly happen again. Oregon is making a push to bring back Chip Kelly. Okay, check out our video that we posted last night with, or actually that was today. I can't keep track of when I post videos. They're all over the place. But we posted a video actually today with Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football discussing the possibility of Chip Kelly going back to Oregon and the pluses and the many minuses. What the expectations could be considering what he accomplished his first go around at Oregon, which is really, I think it gets lost in that he went to 2 NFL stops after Oregon that were mostly miserable. Although I think some of the criticism about his performance with the Philadelphia Eagles is unjustified if you really look at the situation there. But all told, you are what your record is. And he went to Philadelphia, he went to San Francisco, and the results were not good. And now at UCLA, the results not good. They are coming off an 8-4 season this year. He's finally started to win some ball games at UCLA. But if you really look at the Bruins, even this year is a bit of a disappointment when you consider, yes, 8-4 sounds decent, sounds pretty good, like they're putting things together after 4-8 and 3-9 and 3-4 during the pandemic year, but they did not beat a winning team. UCLA did not beat a team with a winning record. And lest we forget, they play in the Pac-12. Anybody with a pulse should go 8-4 in the Pac-12, which means they went. They must have gone 6-3 in conference play because they lost the one non-conference game to Fresno State, which was an utter debacle at the end of the game. So UCLA is improved, and they're a decent football team. But Tony and I discussed Chip Kelly going to Oregon, and we seem to be on the same page in regards to why it doesn't make sense, which reminds me, we've got our guy Ryan Winter coming on the line from Sports Chat 503. I've got to get him a link so he can join us here pretty soon. Ryan Winter from Sports Chat 503 to get his take on the rumors of Chip Kelly coming to Oregon. Florida State hiring a new athletic director from Louisville. Josh Jobe, top corner at Alabama, having surgery, will be out for the college football playoff game against Cincinnati. So that's now Josh Jobe at cornerback. And, of course, John Mechie, 96 catches at wide receiver for Bama, over 1,000 yards. And we had a conversation today with Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. So be looking out for that conversation because it is a good one. And so we've got a video posting soon on Alabama, their preparation for Cincinnati. And of course, National Signing Day is coming up in less than a week. We are blitzing National Signing Day as we do each and every year. So if you've not been around the Voice of College Football on National Signing Day, I will be here all day Wednesday, nonstop next Wednesday, National Signing Day, and then on into Thursday, because consider a lot of the people that we tap as sources are writers that need to work on National Signing Day and need to work nonstop. So a lot of our coverage will be on Thursday and Friday covering National Signing Day, which is December 15th. That's next Wednesday. And we talked to Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. Look out for that video being posted soon. We released videos today on Oregon, Syracuse, and Michigan. I shouldn't even start to recite what videos are out when, because I forget, especially with 25 channels out there. Florida State losing gaining an AD from Louisville. Florida leading wide receiver Jacob Copeland is entering the transfer portal. The quarterback at Incarnate Word, who is possibly the best in the FCS ranks, Cameron Ward, is entering the transfer portal. Virginia Tech is hiring the Jacksonville Jaguars offensive coordinator. Mississippi State, a linebacker, going to Michigan State. Among the news and notes from today. So many things I could cover in addition to what I already cover. There's a litany of transfer portal situations and intriguing names that are in the portal to talk about as well. So again, National Signing Day coming up next Wednesday. Bowl season starts next Friday. Transfer portal is humming. So try to keep up, and we will help you try to keep up. Let me take care of one piece of business while we take our first call. And we're off and running here at the Voice of College Football. Who's up first?
Hey, Mark. It's the real MVP. How you doing?
I am doing well, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good.
What's going on?
Did you, are you going to read the super chat that you got?
Will I read the super chat that I got? Yes, it is my aim and goal to read every super chat that I ever get.
Yeah. And this is a good time to remind you all, if you want Mark's bowl games picks, you can go to his Patreon page as he is looking for the super chat.
Yes, the real MVP. I'm very appreciative of you being my promotions guy. What's on your mind tonight?
Well, I wanted to talk about the lack of interesting bowl games during the season. And I want to propose an idea to fix it.
Okay.
Now,
You
there are
propose
some,
an idea, and then I'll bring to light the misnomer about the lack of interest. Go ahead.
okay, that's fair. Well, there are some interesting bowl games like UCF versus Florida, North Carolina versus South Carolina, and that. But I think we should make the bowls more regional based. For example, and Louisville is playing Air Force. Nobody cares about that game. Nobody. So have them play Western Kentucky, a regional team. Have Clemson play Coastal Carolina. Have UCLA playing San Diego State. Have Utah play Utah State. That way, you're more likely to have some fans go to the game just for the in-state rivalry aspect of the game. And I don't like the conference affiliations with bowl games. I think we should get the best teams for bowl games. Like, in my opinion, the Rose Bowl the last 4 or 5 years has been bogged down by how horrible the Pac-12 has been. I mean, who's excited for Utah, Ohio State? I mean, if Ohio State has all their players, and that's a big if, I understand. That's a whole different set of issues. It's going to be most likely Ohio State will win by 14 to 17 points. I mean, it won't even be close. Mark, why am I wrong?
All right, let's start with something here as I'm taking care of some business. Okay. All right. I understand that the bowl games are deemed to not be as important as they used to be. And when I say they're deemed to not be as important, they still hold the same level of importance tangibly. It's a game in the standings. It is a one game on the record. We still count the game. If a team's 9-3 and they win a bowl game, they're 10-3. So it counts like every other game. Okay, in terms of the matchups and the people's interest in the matchups and the supposed relevance of the games are no more important or less important than they've always been, first and foremost. Okay, what I'm not getting, among other things, about your regional matchups is these teams play regionally. So if you would take any college football team in the nation, especially once you get past the major powers, they generally schedule non-conference games that are regional. Take any team in college football and even the higher ranked teams, and they tend to schedule non-conference games that are regional first and foremost. So they're already playing regional games in the non-conference. Isn't it more interesting to see teams that never play each other, teams that are from different Power 5 leagues playing each other? Isn't that interesting? Don't we want to see the Big Ten play the SEC? We saw the Big Ten and the SEC play one game this year, Auburn and Penn State. That's it. Don't we want to see the SEC and the Big Ten play bowl games?
It's interesting, but I want to see some ties into it from some storylines perspective. Like, for example, and this is a perfect bowl game, is Texas Tech versus Mississippi State. Mike Leach is the head coach of Mississippi State, and he used to coach for Texas Tech. I think that's a great bowl game, and I'll watch it just for the storyline aspect of that. So I would like to see more tie-ins into these bowl games, is all I'm saying. That way, their fan bases can be excited about the bowl game, because I don't know.
Well, what you are proposing from an organizational standpoint isn't going to happen. You're going to have to get some governing body to oversee all the bowl games, and that doesn't happen because they all work independently. So what's good for one bowl game may not be good for another bowl game, and they'll say, well, we wanted that team. Why did you get that team? We want this and we want that. I'm not huge on storylines. That's not a big, but I understand I'm not the typical college football fan. I could care less that Mike Leach is, Mike Leach hasn't been at Texas Tech in forever, so it doesn't really matter to me that he's going to coach against Texas Tech. But I get it. I'm not saying that the bowl system should cater to me, but I get your point. I just think it's a little bit. So what strikes me as funny, a number of things here. Number one, aside from mammoth regular season games, Ohio State, Michigan, the Iron Bowl, a few games out there, almost all of these teams will play in front of a larger TV audience in their bowl game by far than they've played in front of the entire season. I love how people say that the bowl games are insignificant. Nobody cares about them, but more people watch them than watch the regular season games, and especially when they're being played in isolation. So there's only a few times during the bowl schedule in which we have TV conflicts where there are multiple games on. Typically, throughout most of the bowl season, there's only one game on. So if you want to watch college football, you're watching that bowl game, and that's your only choice. Therefore, this is the biggest stage or platform for just about anybody that you can mention, aside from, again, maybe Michigan, Ohio State, and a few others. This is going to be their biggest stage, but somehow this is insignificant, and people are told that nobody cares, but the TV ratings speak otherwise. And you're talking to a guy that was into the TV ratings all the time. So I saw that all the time, and I get it. They're not as popular as they were 10 years ago. So you're right. I'm not pretending that they are, but I think that has to do more with players opting out, and more than anything, it has to do with the playoff. Anytime you say this is super important and this has now become the ultimate, then you have diminished everything else.
Right. Yeah. I think if you want to get players to stop playing in or get them to incentivize them to play bowl games, I think you should either tie NIL money to it, which is something they can do, or if you want to go in a different direction, which is unlikely. I understand what I'm going to propose is unlikely, but it's possible. The NBA All-Star Game, they were having the same issue with players not really trying hard or anything, and they put a charity bonus for the team. And the NBA All-Star rating has gone up significantly because players are playing for something bigger than themselves. So maybe that is another option. I don't know how likely that option is. I believe the NIL money is more likely, but it is something I've heard.
Yes. So your first point, I think, is a good one. And very early in the NIL discussion, or when it was originally unveiled, I'm not going to take credit for this. I may have thought of it first. I don't mean first out of anybody anywhere, but I mean, I may have thought of it before I heard it anywhere, or maybe a caller or somebody commented. I don't remember which, but yeah, we talked about that at the time last summer, that, okay, we can make these bowl games more relevant if the Capital One is sponsoring a bowl game. Well, they can pay players. They can give them gifts. They already get gifts to a certain extent, but I mean sizable gifts, or now that they can be paid to a certain extent by an outside, they're not being paid by the schools, they're being paid by an outside company as sponsor. Absolutely. Then players are going to consider, okay, I can opt out, or I can make $15,000 playing in this ball game.
Right. And have the different amounts that way. Like if the player, you get something incentivized if you win instead of losing. That way you don't have people
I like that
trotting
too.
out there on the field.
15,000 for the winner, 5,000 for the loser.
Right.
Or maybe if the
really
players vote, do you want to go double, or do you want to put all the, that would be interesting. Instead of a 15-5 split, are you willing to go 20,000 for the winners and nothing for the losers?
That would be interesting. But I don't know how you would get
love
the
that
vote
idea.
And
And like I say, we've been talking about it close to whatever it's been, 6 months, that this NIL has been in effect. And from the first time I heard that or dreamed it up myself, whichever it was, I have been on board with that. We've got sponsors connected right to the bowl games, and these are the same companies that are cutting NIL deals with these players. Let's keep these players involved. Absolutely.
Right. And I think that you would have less players. You would have the games mean something more, because like Florida, Oklahoma last year, that would have been a great game if everybody played in that game.
Yes.
That's a shame what happened there. And this year, Taquan Thibodeau, the Oregon defensive end, he's out already. So he's the best player, probably maybe in the whole country.
Yep.
And him now playing hurts the Oregon Oklahoma Bowl.
There would be a few things that would need to be worked out. For example, if a player says that he's playing and does technically play, and maybe he plays the first play of the game, then he says, I'm done, or he has it already arranged with his head coach that, coach, I'm just going to play one play so I can get the NIL money. There would have to be a few things worked out like that. You've got that. And I think
you can make that like an NC violation type thing.
A violation, but who's going to determine who gets penalized?
You can put sanctions on the coach and the coach, and if the player has to come back next season.
Well, maybe
the coach, if you do this, you're suspended X amount of games.
Well, first of all, we don't have any players opting out that are coming back the next year. They're all opting out for NFL reasons. So they're gone. They don't care. So we can't penalize the player. Number two, if the coach doesn't have any control, I don't know that we can hold coaches to that degree, that they have to be on pins and needles, and we have to determine a play limit or something like that. There would something would have to be dealt with there.
Yeah, I was just saying, for your example, if it's egregious and both people knew before going into the game and it was found out, then you could hold the coach accountable.
Yeah, I guess that's a lot to get involved. I'm just saying that could be a sticking point.
Yeah,
right,
I agree
there.
with this.
And I don't know how to manage that off the top of my head, because you can't force a guy to play the entire game. And there are players that obviously only play a certain portion of plays. They're on a defensive line rotation or whatever. So you can't say, well, you play 20 plays and they only play 18. So anyway, I like the idea. It would just have to be managed properly. So I like the NIL idea. The storyline idea, I'm not on board with. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's not a right or wrong. I just don't care about storylines necessarily. And I don't think there's enough of them out there to put together. And I like the bowl matchups as they are. Not that every one I'm intrigued by, but I think the process works fairly well. It's just an issue with the college football playoff, and we're in a gold medal mentality society. So that's all that matters. And nobody cares about the bowl games themselves.
Right. I agree with that. I was just throwing out ideas. Not all ideas are good ideas, but the worst ideas are ones that aren't set at all.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you, to real MVP. Don't get me wrong on this. You're spitting out some good thoughts. I will tell you that based on my recollection, and we'll see how it plays out this year, every time I do a call-in show during bowl season in the playoffs, unless there is a bowl game played that day, and so some people are interested in the Citrus Bowl, and so they'll call and talk about it. Nobody's calling about any bowl games that I can think of that aren't being played right then and there. Everybody's calling about the playoff.
You don't want to hear about Toledo versus Middle Tennessee, or Coastal California versus Northern Illinois.
Well,
those are the first two bowl games.
Okay, they are the first. I'm looking right at them, but see, here's the deal. Are you eliminating these bowl games? It doesn't sound like you are. You're just looking for better matchups. No. Well, who's the good matchup against Middle Tennessee that's going to make it interesting? You can only create so many interesting matchups. Some of them are just going to be Middle Tennessee and Toledo anyway.
Right. I get that. Well, for Coastal Carolina, for example, have them play Clemson. Clemson might dominate them, but that'd be an interesting storyline.
So it's interesting because they're in the same state.
Well, they're in the same state. You can have that in-state rivalry. Who's the best in the state type thing. Have a border wars with North Carolina, South Carolina. I think that's a lot of UCF versus Florida so hyped this year as a bowl game. because if UCF wins, they can claim, I mean, through transitive property, which I get nobody really likes, but still, they can still claim they're the best team in the state of Florida this year.
So we can have Ohio State play Toledo. Is that your Ohio
How about Ohio
State
State
bowl
Cincinnati?
game? Well, that doesn't quite work out. One of them's in a playoff game.
Well, if they weren't in a playoff, is what I was saying. Or you could expand the playoff. I'm seeing Joe. Have you seen Joe Klatt's proposal for a playoff?
Is it recent?
It's recent, but he put it in with this year's teams.
No, I did not see that.
So basically, his idea is the first four teams get a bye. The first 6 seeds are conference champions.
So he screwed up right off the top, unfortunately. But anyway, go ahead.
I knew you didn't like byes, but everything else seemed to work. I
love Joel Klatt, and he's phenomenal. I love Joel Klatt, and he has good ideas. But I will have to explain to him, I guess, if I ever get the chance, why byes don't work. Okay, go ahead.
So it's conference champions 1 through 6 seed, and then the rest is at large bids. And then after each round you would reseed the teams. I'm not sure about that aspect either, but I do like the idea of having the top 6 seeds conference championships. That way, there's an incentive to play in the conference championship and do well. And there would be some great matchups. This year you would have Notre Dame play Ohio State. That Georgia would play Ole Miss. That would be a battle of defense versus offense. Michigan State Baylor. That'd be good. And then Michigan State Utah. Michigan State Utah. And then what was the last one? It was Oklahoma State Pittsburgh.
Well, it sounds like I'm going to have to plug in this playoff system, my playoff system, into what's currently happening to see who would be in the playoff and share that. But when I hear these playoff systems, the one thing that I carry through that I don't hear from anybody else is they say the top this and the top 6 of this, or the top 4 of that, or the top 16 of that. How do we arrive at the top 4, the top 4 from according to who?
Right. I guess that's where the committee would come in.
Why do we have to have committees?
I don't want.
We don't have to have committees. Why do we have people selecting things?
I don't know. I guess people like the human element to it, and they don't want a BCS type system, because the BCS usually got it wrong.
I wouldn't have that either.
What would you have, Mark?
So I've unveiled it a few different ways. So let's say we've got a 16-team playoff. I'm not proposing a 16-team playoff, but I'm just saying this is one route. Okay. I don't necessarily have a huge issue with the committee. See, the committee is too damn powerful with only 4 teams in the playoff. That's holding a lot of power. Okay. If we go to 16 teams or 12, their power diminishes. Because think about it. If we all sat here and each one of us watching right now wrote down the top 16 teams in the country, what would we have? Almost everyone would have the 16 teams. And the couple that we would have differences on would be the bottom couple. And if you can't make a 16-team playoff, then forget it anyway. So the more teams involved, the more I'm okay with a committee, even though I'm dead set against it in regards to, in theory or in concept, I don't agree with it. I don't like it. Putting that kind of power in the hands of 13 people, I don't get it. But the more the playoffs expanded, the more their power diminishes. It doesn't really matter if the teams that's number 6 right now that they've held out of the playoff is in the playoff. So it doesn't really matter. Their power based on the proposed 12-team playoff with the buys would become who gets the buys. That their power switches to who's in versus who gets the buys. Okay, this is the way I would do it with 16 teams. One of two ways. Either you include everybody, Power 5, Group of 5, meaning everybody's eligible, all conferences eligible, and you take all 10 conference champions. So you've got 10 teams and you got 6 wild cards. Okay, the wild card spots are determined by record in the Power 5. And I've gone through every playoff year to work out this system to see how difficult it would be and how it would be applied. You go by record, and for any ties, you go head to head. And then your third tiebreaker would break all ties, and that would be your strength of record. So it's basically a combination of your strength of schedule and your dominance against those opponents. And I've run that system through 2014 through 2020, and it looks good to me. So you can have a 16-team playoff. And I get it for people screaming at me right now saying the Sun Belt champion doesn't deserve to be there and the Conference USA champion doesn't deserve to be there and the MAC champion. I get that. I get that thought. They're not those 3 teams, which this year would be Louisiana, Northern Illinois, and whoever the Conference USA
UTSA
champion is. I forget. Yeah, Texas San Antonio. Very good. I understand they're not part of the top 16 teams in the country, the best 16 teams in the country. But it's almost like an NCAA basketball situation. So we would definitely have the 11 best teams in the country would be there because the 5 Power 5 champions are among the 16 best teams. And then all your at-large would be among the best 16 teams. So you would have the 11 best teams in the country there for sure, maybe 12 or 13 of the 16 best teams. And then it's just part of the process that the MAC champion might be roughly the 60th best team in the country, and Conference USA might be about the same. And that's just part of the reward that they won a conference, that they're in the playoff. Okay, that's number one. You can go that way. Or you can go the way of Group of 5, go play your own championship, and then apply my same system, but only to the Power 5.
Now, I would have a question for that is, for your first scenario, the one with the Group of 5 in there, how would the seating be? So if you were UTSA, would you be 13, would you be 14, 15, or 16? Or would you still be 10, 9, or 8?
I don't remember how I had that set up. I should go dig that
because I don't think it'd be fair for
a
team like I don't think it'd be fair for a team like Michigan State, for example, who's so far better away than Louisiana, to be seated lower than them and have to play a Georgia or an Alabama.
Well, right now they're not even in a playoff. We think they're better.
I think if you took a poll, I think it would be 95% Michigan State, 5% UTSA at most. I mean, it's a completely different version of the sport.
Well, I understand that. I agree with that, but I'm not interested, with all due respect of everyone watching me right now, I'm not real interested in what fans think about the placement of teams and how good teams are. I'm not real respectful across the board. I'm respectful of them as people, but in terms of their opinions as college football experts, I'm not necessarily buying most fans' logic in
fan is short for fanatic.
That's right. All right, to Real MVP, I appreciate the call.
Yeah, no problem. Congrats on 10 million views on your channel, Mark.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right, let me hit this super chat real quick, and then we've got a guest on before I get to other calls. Thank you so much for the super chat coming in from Don, who says, we need to run it back bowl. Need a run it back bowl. Example, Ohio State, Oregon. Think it would be a popular bowl game. Congrats on 10 million views. Don, now you may be onto something there as well. Run it back bowl. I'm not sold on the name, but Yeah, the Run It Back Bowl, the Rematch Bowl. Yeah, we have teams that where there's a controversy in regards to how relevant the first matchup was. You have them play again. Yeah, that would spark some interest, I would think, because people wanted to see Ohio State and Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Speaking of which, there's Ryan Winter on the line from Sports Chat 503. Hey, Ryan.
What's up, Mark? How we doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Fantastic. What's going on?
What is going on? What's going on?
A lot going on. We got decommits. We got guys hitting the transfer portal. The whole coaching staff's gone. I mean, last time we talked, it felt like the Ducks were on somewhat solid ground, and now it is an absolute tsunami.
All right. Let's try to wade through the tsunami then. You're the guy to do it with us here.
Let's go.
All right. We'll take this chronologically. Mario Cristobal courted by Miami. Kind of a messy situation in regards to what was going on the Miami end. I don't know about your take, if there was anything that seemed a bit sketchy on the Oregon side, not from the administration or the football program, but in regards to Mario Cristobal. So take us from there in regards to how that story developed, what he was offered by Oregon. It certainly showed based on his comments that there was, I think he vaguely said something like they're putting stuff together, meaning they're offering me some sort of an extension, that Oregon certainly just didn't let him ride off into the sunset. There was a concerted effort to keep him.
Yeah, so going back, I think obviously right out of the gate when Mario gets announced, 2017 or whatever it was people were talking, oh, well, this guy's going to go to Miami. If this guy has any success, he's going to go to Miami. So this is obviously in the discussion for years. And then this year just really ramped up, from the Miami side. It is a mess a little bit because lack of an AD. I don't know if they really did this the way that you normally do this. It feels like they got the boosters together. They committed the money to it. They figured out this is what they're going to do. They labeled Mario as the guy, and they went and basically, took him. And they didn't do it in the way that I think many other schools do it, with a kind of a formal suggestion or offering or whatever the case may be. And so I feel like there's kind of two camps. One camp thinks that Oregon was kind of blindsided by it, weren't prepared for it. The other camp says Oregon was very, very in the know and what was happening, and they were putting their ducks in a row from a pretty early stage. On the field, though, it was pretty obvious something happened. And when you had that first Utah game, completely fell apart, came back, had the Beeve game, won that one, looked better, but then go and do the exact same thing in the Pac-12 championship game against the Utah team. The writing was on the wall. The team looked very flat. There was discussion pretty much when the Micah Pittman news broke, when he left to join the transfer portal, that something was brewing in this team, that things were looking in a different direction, and this might have been the case. So Mario leaves. Congratulations to Miami. They got their guy, and I think it'll be a good fit for them. And then now Oregon's literally just scrambling, trying to figure out what do they do next.
So before we get to the possible candidates and who's on that list, what has been the fallout in regards to the number of players jumping into the transfer portal, possibly following Mario to Miami, etc.?
We haven't heard a lot about directly following Mario to Miami, but a lot of guys have already decommitted from this recruiting class. We know how great of a recruiter Mario Cristobal is, and that whole staff. So many of them have now left. Obviously, we know about Joe Moorhead, the offensive coordinator, took the job at Akron, but then also defensive coordinator Tim DeRuyter goes down to Texas Tech. And, we're expecting the whole staff to basically be gone and come back and completely rebuild this thing. And you got some really good talent in the building, but you're also losing a lot of talent right out the door. For example, today, DJ James, defensive back, who's a starter this year, joined the transfer portal. You had obviously in the season, Micah Pittman, a starting wide receiver, joining the transfer portal as well. And you've got a lot of guys also kind of just non-committal right now, saying, hey, I'm going to play the bowl game and I'll make my decision afterward. We know the transfer portal works both ways, though. So again, for all the guys that go to join the transfer portal, we know there's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity coming the other way. So I think Oregon's still fine. I have a positive outlook on things. It's just football. But man, it was a weird weekend. I'm telling you what, I was in Vegas on that Friday night, and it just completely fell apart. We walked out of that stadium totally stunned. We thought we were going to get a completely different game. Still thought Utah had a really good chance to win, obviously, coming off that other game. But then to literally wake up that Saturday morning, and then by Sunday, Monday, this thing is completely gone. That was something I don't think many Duck fans saw coming on the Thursday night before that Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah, Miami fans that are connected to our channel were certainly optimistic about Mario Cristobal going to Miami, and it's something that he's been stating for years. And so I could only go by the numerous professional sources and fan feedback that that this was possible and then likely, and then it certainly came down that way. So now, without a head coach, it's on to how does the administration find that next guy. I'm going to bring up a name that's the obvious one that's in all the sources, because this would be another example of targeting a guy and saying, that's our guy, let's go get him, versus just saying, okay, we're doing a national search, we're going to interview and figure out who that best candidate is. And that's looking at the latter approach, targeting a guy, Chip Kelly, UCLA.
Yeah. I think a lot of Duck fans saw that one coming, and I don't know how really the flock feels about that. I think there's some split messages there. We know we're coming off of a recruiting coach, right? They had questions about in-game coaching. Offense was stagnant. Oregon fans were frustrated with the offense. Probably the biggest frustration of the whole thing was this year was the offense and the passing game specifically. Chip Kelly, we know there's a love affair with his offense, and we know there's a love affair with him and his time at Oregon. But, his time in Oregon was a little lightning in a bottle, and he lost to Stanford too. So it wasn't like it was perfect. But what he did then, I think, has been replicated numerous times, not to the extreme that he did it, but cat's out of the bag, I feel like, a little bit on that one. He would have to bring a really, really, really strong recruiting assistant coach base and have to bring in a really strong defensive coordinator. Jerry Asnero, good friend of his, running the defense down at UCLA, and there was a lot of question marks about that. And, he's on the hot seat down there, won the last 3 games and had a really convincing game against USC, which always helps. But that USC team was pretty much a train wreck, and he beat a Cal team and I think an Arizona team. And so again, that end of the year, winning those 3 games was big for him because it kind of cooled the hot seat a little bit. But I'm not so sure that that's the way to go. It's obviously a familiar name. It's somebody who you think you could trust. He left the first time for the NFL. I kind of think Oregon's in a position where they're looking at either maybe 2 different camps, right? Do you try to go with somebody who's a known product here, who might have ties here, who might want to stay here? You've been burned by the last couple coaches, and you don't want to go through that process again and again and again. There's another camp out there saying, hey, we think this team is championship ready and is one of the better teams in the conference. We need to go and hire a coach. I've had a couple friends say, I would be disappointed if Oregon didn't hire a coach that would also be a coach that Ohio State would hire. I said, well, maybe that's not exactly the level that I'm asking for. Again, people have floated all sorts of names. And I remember when the Oregon basketball coach came up and we got Dana Altman, who's turned out to be the best basketball coach we've ever had at Oregon. People really were unsure about that. They literally were saying they should hire Phil, Jackson. Literally, the guy, as he's the coach, just come off the coach of the Lakers. I mean, there's some names thrown around. People talk about Urban Meyer. People talking all this. It's like, I think there needs to be tempered expectations a little bit. The names that were thrown around really early on, obviously, were those 2 guys, Justin Wilcox, coach at Cal, because he's an Oregon alum, Chip Kelly, because he obviously had his time here. And I threw out the name Kalani Sitake early, and he got an interview. He obviously has done very well at BYU, but he's an alum over there. So he's kind of got the gig that he wants or whatever. And I don't know really else who is out there. That obviously there's a tremendous amount of talk on Twitter around Lane Kiffin and all sorts of other sort of names that are out there, but I'll believe it when I see it. They've been very tight-lipped about this, and they've kind of done it the exact opposite way that it was done with Miami, with a lot of talk, a lot of leaks, a lot of conversation. Oregon's kind of done it the exact opposite, and I'll actually be surprised when they announce it.
It hurts when you lose the coach after you've made the conference championship game, especially because that is another week in which he stuck around to obviously finish out the season, and gives you a week less to go out there and get somebody and prepare for National Signing Day, which is only 1 week away. So that's another, there's damage control there, and just trying to keep that recruiting class together with those student athletes not knowing who their next head coach is going to be.
Yeah, the recruiting class, I think, is a real panic mode. These kids are, no offense, they're trying to make the best decision possible for them in their future. But these are kids that, a lot of them, they're literally getting conversations 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day from coaches. Like, the amount of energy spent on an 18-year-old to go play football for your team seems a little out of whack. It seems like, here's the information, let me know if you're interested. Instead, it's all the time, constantly hounding these kids, and at any moment they can flip, and it just scares the heck out of these coaches. I don't know if that's all right with the system. I think realistically, this is going to hurt. This year, it's going to hurt. You were on path to have a great recruiting class because you'd stacked up these recruiting classes during Mario's time. That's the thing that Oregon has never been able to do, Mark, is stack up 3, 4 of them in a row. So here he had this opportunity. You thought you were going to get another class. As soon as that coaching staff bounces, you knew you're going to have guys evacuate from the class, and that's what has happened. But now you're also seeing guys on the team leaving too, right? So it's a double whammy. And like I said, I think the transfer portal is going to work both ways. I know there's a lot of guys in the transfer portal right now. And I think Oregon will still be fine. It's still, I feel like, one of the better jobs in the West. And I think it has a lot going on for it. I think there's obviously deep pockets with the boosters. There's great facilities. There's good buzz. You've got a good stadium. It's not like you're trying to recruit kids to go to a half-empty stadium. You've got a fan base that's excited. It's pumped up. So I still think there's a lot of really positive things going on out here.
And the fervency of the fan base, as evidenced by the full stadium, is even more of a contrast to what's going on in that conference than it would be in other Power 5 conferences. So it's a hotbed for college football, and there still is a lot going for it. It's a recognizable brand name, and with the uniforms and the logo and the Phil Knight connection, and again, the rabid fan base and the resources. Obviously, Mario Cristobal knew what he was doing in the recruiting trail and was a master recruiter, but he couldn't have done that without the facilities and the resources to be able to go out there and do that. So the next coach will have that same infrastructure to his benefit.
Yeah, I mean, that was my point when I was talking about Justin Wilcox, a guy who's just a couple years older than me, grew up in Oregon, a guy who you would think, if he got the opportunity to take this job, that he would do a great job with it and run with it. Of course, we thought the same thing with Mark Helfrich, right? That didn't work out. But, the theory on that is that, compare Cal to Oregon, right? If you took the same coach at Cal, who's had some pretty good success or marginal success, whatever you want to call it, what could he do with Oregon's resources? What could he do with Oregon's, dime? And, maybe it's the same thing. I don't really know because, again, you don't know it until you see it. But you would think that he'd have a better chance to be successful here than he would be at Cal. And I think that could be also something that you look forward to in the future and say, okay, you don't need to necessarily get a coach that's 10-2 right now. Every coach you've ever hired, for the most part, except for 2 coaches in the past, were, had a losing record or had no experience at all. I mean, look at Chip Kelly, for example. Chip Kelly obviously made his bones at Oregon with his success as an offensive coordinator and as a head coach. It took him to the NFL and everything. And if he comes back, whatever, I guess that's the case. But I don't think many Oregon fans would have been that excited if you were to ask them a month ago when they're number 3 in the country, looking at the National College Football Playoff, and say, hey, how about next year we switch the coach out with UCLA? How about, you like that? I don't know if many Oregon fans would sign up for that.
Do you have a realistic wish list?
Yeah, I think early on again, I think there's kind of 2 camps here. I think there's kind of the older camp that maybe doesn't want to get burned, doesn't necessarily feel like it's the elite job that people think it is. They're kind of still maybe stuck a little bit in the past. And I think there's a newer generation that's like, hey, we're one of the best teams. We're going to be a college football playoff. We're going to win a national championship. All this other sort of stuff that's driving that group. That's really saying, hey, if we don't get a guy like Urban Meyer or something, I mean, there are people who are on Twitter I'm seeing who said, if they hire Justin Wilcox, I'm not re-signing my season tickets. And if you were to ask me a couple years ago, I said that would have been the number 1 reason to sign up for season tickets, that the kid, you grew up with the guy. Maybe we're having such a bigger effect as being a national brand that you're having a lot of other people who are not necessarily Oregonians who have those same kind of sensibilities that we have as Oregonians. Again, there's not that many people in our state, Mark. I mean, we're talking 3.5 million people in the whole state. It's not like we have that many people to choose from. So, I look at it as big picture. I think Oregon's done a great job of branding themselves, of expanding their footprint, of getting kids from across the country to want to come out here. And you know what? If you had to give me the odds right now, I would say that Chip Kelly's probably pretty high. I think that he still rings true with a lot of the boosters. I still think that there's a lot of cachet with his offense. If you get somebody to run the defense correctly, and if you get a bunch of young guys willing to recruit, you might have something. He's a guy who's been there. He's proven that he's been able to get you to the promised land. And he was getting you to the promised land with 2 3-star recruits. If you could turn this thing up with 4 5-star recruits, maybe if he took over this year, he might have one of the more talented rosters he ever had. So, and that's saying something, because there were some really good players on those teams he had. He also, I think, kind of gets a bad rap for being like not a good recruiter at all, where he did get good recruits. I mean, the DeAnthony Thomas recruit came during his time frame, and it just came because he was so willing to be able to be creative with him on offense. USC was going to put DeAnthony Thomas as a cornerback where everybody else would have expected him to play. Oregon said, you can play whatever you want. Let's make a position for you, right? That's the genius of Chip Kelly. And I think that's what Oregon fans were frustrated with Mario this year, was a lack of creativity. And it felt like the creativity that Joe Moorhead was going to bring, maybe Mario had his hands on the offense a little bit more and wanted more of the traditional running game offense. That it worked, but it was basically survival this whole year. It was really boring football to watch for Duck fans. They got wins. The Ohio State game was great. Don't get me wrong, one of the best wins we ever had in the program. But outside of that this year, there was not that many highlights.
I think it's lost on a lot of people because it's been a while ago, and in this day and age, a decade ago is a lifetime. And Chip Kelly's had 2 somewhat unsuccessful stints in the NFL, and of course, he's sub 500 at UCLA. But it's remarkable what he accomplished at Oregon. It's just astounding when you look at the 33-3 conference record and look at just going to BCS game after BCS game after BCS game and coming that close to winning a national championship. It really is astounding.
Oh, absolutely. And the guy and the games that he lost to NFL talent, on the front line and a quarterback play. I mean, there was some great quarterbacks out here. Andrew Luck. I mean, there were some great players out here when that was happening. Stanford was good then. USC was good then. It wasn't like this now where USC's been down. USC's, Mario's taking advantage of this time where USC's been down. Not to say that, this team, that Mario Cristobal had, the Justin Herbert year, wasn't one of the better years, but a lot of the frustration from Duck fans started when Justin Herbert left and went to the pros and became the rookie of the year and was throwing the ball all over the place as a rookie, was taking the top off the defense literally every single Sunday. And it was like, that kid was just here. Where was that? And he's throwing bubble screens out here, So I do think a lot of the frustration started right then. And there's a lot of Duck fans right now, do not get me wrong, that are happy that Cristobal's gone. There's a lot of Duck fans that are thinking, wait a minute, this guy's falling. Oh my gosh, we're going to lose this recruit, that recruit. I think a lot of Duck fans are like, we're fine. We're fine. We're going to get somebody else in here who's going to run this thing and maybe run this thing better than the other program did before. either way, of course, like I said before, I was born on campus. I'm multi-generational. I'm going nowhere. I'm going to support the team this way, the other way forever. So it's all good to me.
Ryan, it is great to have you here. Did you post anything on your channel from the Pac-12 championship game, or what is the latest content that you've got up there?
I just, the Pac-12 championship, I usually try to go with my camcorder to the game, record pieces to get some highlight film. I wasn't recording anything. I was just there as a fan. Plus, there was really not many highlights of that game. I was there. I was with the family. I was with the flock. But by halftime, I kind of hit the bar a little bit on those. The second half, I had a couple margaritas maybe. I'm in Vegas, right? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But not that one. We brought home a whole bunch of misery from that one. And yeah, I'll continue to have stuff on my channel. We'll talk about the bowl game, the bowl game of two teams that should have felt like they were in the college football playoff. Now don't even have coaches. Obviously, Oklahoma does now, but that's going to be a weird one with two. I heard a joke saying that they should have had Mike Bellotti be the head coach, Bob Stoops be the head coach, and on the first play, have it be an onside kick.
Oh, nice. I didn't hear that little tagline to it. I didn't get that part of it. And I got to admit, I didn't read into that when I saw that somewhere on social media, and I took it. I bought it. Like, oh, Mike Bellotti. Yeah, they don't have a coach. Are they doing the same thing? They're asking Bellotti back. Okay. So they suckered me in.
Yeah, but it's just a weird situation, and we've been through these before. We just don't want to continue to keep going through these. And I think there is a population of the Duck fan base that do felt burned and felt a little bit, spurned, because again, kind of like that Tennessee group, where they don't really feel like this is a place that people should leave so readily. And again, no offense, Cristobal, he's got his family down there. He's going to have a great run. But he also said that this was the place that he was the happiest in his entire professional career. He said he had better time here at Oregon and felt more secure and happier than he'd ever been in the career. And I don't know if that's going to be necessarily the same feeling in Miami, even though he's home, even though he's with his fan base, even though he's with his crew. I don't know exactly how that's going to go for him. And I could technically see them maybe in a couple of years, if they don't have the success they think they have, make it less comfortable for Mario. I mean, obviously right now they rolled out the red carpet, but they have big expectations for him. They're thinking he's going to bring them a national championship quickly. And I don't know if that's the case.
Yes, there are all sorts of cliches about why a person should not return home. And some of those cliches may come home to roost, have some truth to them. And I also saw during his introductory news conference where he basically said that the people most responsible for his professional growth were at Oregon. And he named a few people by name to say they are most responsible for me being a professional and having me arrive at this place where I am right now.
Oh yeah. I mean, he doesn't sign that contract without that. I mean, he was making $5 million a year here. He signed for $8 million a year there. Right. I mean, that's a big difference. And I do think that there were real question marks when he took over. The coaching staff at that point was, obviously we know the story with Willie Taggart and everything, but we had a bunch of Oregon players basically have a petition signed around the whole coaching staff and all the players that they all were lockstep. They said, this is the guy. And so the writing was on the wall. People like this guy. And again, I've talked with all of these Oregon coaches, shook their hands, talked with them on numerous occasions, dinners or whatever. Mario had a great presence. I mean, I'm 6'2", 240. He's not that much bigger than me. Stature-wise, his presence was huge, right? So you can tell this was a big deal. But he, before Oregon, had not had that much success as a head coach. His success as a head coach was because of Oregon. Very similar to Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly came in as a head offensive coordinator, became the head coach, and became the guy. So there's something to be said about Oregon as well. Oregon's a school where you can do that. And that might be the play now. Again, a lot of people are trying to get a head coach with coaching experience that's done this. It's a recruiter. That's hard to find, man, especially this late in the game when everybody else has been hired. Your best play might be after a guy who's a younger guy, offensive coordinator. Again, one of the names they threw out early was the Joe Brady name, right? And I thought had huge success in college with a great offense. It's the best offense we've ever seen, and totally turned that around And, I thought maybe that would be a good play too, So there's a bunch of names out there. Kellen Moore is another name people are talking about, the BYU quarterback from BYU quarterback, Dallas, DC or offensive coordinator. So I don't know. I think there's just a lot of options. And to be honest, I have no idea what direction they're going. Everything I read on Twitter is taking me this way or this way or this way, or all through the message boards and people I talk to who are close to the program. I've got nothing.
Ryan Winter loves his team, but he's got everything in perspective. That's always awesome to hear. So, Ryan, hey, the sun's going to come up tomorrow, and there's going to be an Oregon football season, regardless of who's in charge next year. And again, with their money, resources, everything they've got going for them, I'm sure that they will make a quality hire.
Yeah, they'll be fine. Starting the year at Georgia, huge marquee game. They have all that buzz, all that hype throughout the whole offseason. Get somebody in here, start up the spring game, start up the conditioning. It's a brand new season, the college football calendar. This is the end of it. So it starts afresh right there. You get a new recruiting class in. Hopefully these guys will maintain somewhat, and it won't be that big of a deterrent for other players to come out here, because I think that's the biggest thing is people, players, families, they need to see a vision. They need to see a program that's stability with a vision, and it'll play their kid and do what they need to do. And hopefully they hit a home run with this hire.
Ryan Winter, everyone. Sports Chat 503 right here on YouTube. Ryan, we appreciate you stopping by, clarifying things for us in a very cloudy situation.
Thank you,
Mark.
Mark.
As much as you possibly could.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Happy holidays, you and your family. You're the best, man. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Ryan. It's our guy, Ryan Winter there, Sports Chat 503. That would not be me. That would be the guy we just talked to. Absolutely. So let's get back on the phone lines. Two things I will note, because there are two kind of conversations going on. And believe me, I know that I'm like 45 minutes behind in the chat as I'm conversing with Ryan. I'm also looking at the comments in the chat. So I appreciate everybody congratulating us. So you're congratulating yourself as well. Keep that in mind. This is not about me. This is not just me. I could be sitting here talking to no one. So this is about you as well. Congratulations to us for reaching 10 million views. And no, I don't sit there and count all the views on YouTube. YouTube send me some kind of notification to say, congratulations, 10 million views. You just hit 10 million views today. So that's great. That does not include the other team channels. So we could probably tack on 1 million over there. But right here on the main channel, 10 million views. So thank you. I'm just talking to myself and the wall and the camera if it's not for you. So thank you so much for that. And for those of you who like the videos and contribute and just participate in the live chat, leave comments, share the videos on social media, tell people about what's going on here. Thank you so much for your contribution. And I also see the comments going back and forth about Army Navy. I think that was in response to me noting that this Saturday there's one college football game. And in some respects, it's the most important college football game of the year, Army Navy. And so I love to see the support for both sides of our military. All right, let's get back to the phone lines. And thank you so much for waiting, everyone. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Kevin, Dallas, Georgia. How you doing this evening, Mark?
Kevin, I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
Great. Congratulations on 10 million. And as you state, and the biggest reason why, Mark, is that, hey, to the 100th degree, you're professional, man. I mean, it's top shelf as far as everything you do, whether it's the team videos or whether it's, and honestly, my wheelhouse is when you do the live shows. I mean, that's because it's always interesting as far as to hear what perspectives are across the country. Agree or not agree, hey, it's all about, one thing as far as being able to have variety, because as we know, variety is the spice of life. So, and I mean, just professionalism, Mark, that you bring, you treat everyone, whether their conversation is down the middle or whether it's whether they're throwing what's it, the wiffle ball at you, and you're like, okay, where they're going with this particular comment, particular question or thought. Hey, you make them feel like, I can't even find a word, Mark, but just on behalf of those that we're alluding to, thanks.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate
but
that.
Well, I mean, it's the truth, Mark. It is the truth. Three bullets, Mark. One is power brokers, transfer portal, and a leveling down as far as the playing field when it comes to coaches across the country. You know, the one thing that is refreshing, and I can only find one word to describe it, is wow, is the number of impact hires, and I would say more so with the state of Florida. The only position where I have to say I have a question mark is still Florida State, but I feel that Florida made a great move, as well as University of Miami. But my only question as far as all those moves across the country, as well as LSU, et cetera, and USC, will be a matter of who are they bringing on board in regards to staff, OCs, DCs, et cetera. And one point that just really one particular program that just really blew me away, Mark, and I like to see how you feel about it, is the number of LSU staff that were movers and shakers when it comes to recruiting that were not asked to be back, and as of late, Kevin Falk. I know as far as Kerry Joseph going to Nebraska, then as far as Corey Raymond being the DB coach at Florida now. And I was just wondering, how did you feel that one of those power brokers would just be a given that one of them would have to remain on the staff?
I would think that if you're a top flight head coach going to a new situation like that, especially in a part of the country, in a conference in which you are unfamiliar and do not have recruiting ties, not that Notre Dame doesn't go national, and obviously they're going to Texas, they're going to Florida, but you know, Brian Kelly's working in an area of the country and going to be connecting with people that he's never had any connection to in the past. I would think that I would take a quick scan, read on the situation in terms of what coaches are on that current staff to determine who's successful, who's a hot commodity, and can I retain them? And I'm being flooded with a bankroll by the university to retain a coaching staff or go out and get a coaching staff. So money should not be an issue. Now, with Corey Raymond in particular, he accepted a higher level position elsewhere. But yeah, I don't know if Brian Kelly's just, for lack of a better word, stubborn to say, I want my own people. I want to start from scratch. And if I couldn't bring them from Notre Dame, and I know that he tried with a few of those, with the offensive and defensive coordinators at Notre Dame, they had to up the ante at Notre Dame to retain them. And so Brian Kelly couldn't bring them with him. That yeah, it surprises me that he would just be so quick to dismiss, if that is in fact what happened.
And then on the other hand, as far as I think that as far as at the end of this year, well, I really can't say really at the end of the year, but now, as far as the game changer for the 22-23 season, and it's a little known. Well, I'm not going to really say little known, but more so as in a little, a very seldom at best spoken about, Mark, and that's in reference to for every 7 young men that transfer from your program, you get 7 additional scholarships plus the 25 that you normally have as far as your high school kids. And if you shop wisely, it can be a game changer, because you can look at 2 programs. So if you can see the best of both worlds, best and worst of both worlds for that matter, and that is Oklahoma and Alabama. You know, Alabama, you know, it's a given that they struck the mother load when it came to Jamison Williams. And then as far as Henry To'oTo'o, I would have to still say a grade incomplete. But then when it comes to Oklahoma, as far as Wanya Morris and the running back, Eric Gray. And Eric Gray, I mean, I think I've seen him maybe one time, but for the bulk of Oklahoma's season, he was pretty much on a milk carton. And Wanya Morris, I don't know if he even saw the field, Mark. So.
Yeah, I know that Oklahoma people were surprised that Wanya Morris was a bit of a bust there, and I don't know why he was, because they expected a lot more. and he did see the field, but not meaningful time. He was a backup and not even a high-level rotational backup. So, so basically, you're just talking about what's the point that you're trying to make there?
Well, just more so as in if you shop wisely as far as in the transfer portal, that it could be unfortunately, boom or bust. You know, with Alabama, it happened to be a boom this year. But one thing also, Mark, I don't know whether you had 30 seconds that you can do without, and you've looked into as far as those blue blood programs, your Alabamas, your Georgias, on the peripheral, Clemson, etc. And the one thing I've noticed there's only one program that has not. I'll take that back. Two programs where I really haven't seen a high attrition rate when it comes to the transfer portal. And that's more so, number one would be Georgia. And then secondly, and I don't know whether you want to say, because you would have a better feel for this than I would, the second, and I would say maybe a distant second, but second nonetheless, would be Ohio State.
Well, what comes to mind there is that I am often, now that this transfer portal has been really humming for a year plus now, I'm really astounded at players who are starting players, seem to be in a good place, at least on the field, and they're leaving and going somewhere else. Hendon Hooker, the starting quarterback at Virginia Tech, leaves, goes to Tennessee. Now he landed on his feet. He's having a nice career and has had a productive season at Tennessee. So it worked out for him. But I'm astounded at how many schools are losing prominent players, not players in the Jamison Williams category who are super, super talented and stuck behind 3 or 4 guys and looking for that opportunity. That's what we expected to see out of this portal, especially at the quarterback position, because there's only one that can play. But what we're seeing is just guys leaving that are prominent players at certain schools. You're right. Can we think of a prominent player that's left Georgia? I cannot off the top of my head. I'm sure somebody will dive in the chat. I'm not talking about a talented guy who was a 4-star or 5-star when he was in high school. I'm talking about a guy that's producing and is on the field. Ohio State, Jamison Williams, even for as good as he is, he wasn't caught like 8 passes last year at Ohio State. They haven't lost anybody with significant playing time. They've lost a bunch of prospects. Obviously, Quinn Ewers, the quarterback, but he never threw a pass there. Has Alabama really lost anybody? They lost Ben Davis, but he was a backup to a backup along the defensive line. And again, another 5-star who didn't pan out and went to Texas. So,
well,
yeah.
Mark, they've had numbers as far as to go into the portal, but if you want to go back to the Wayback Machine, when they had the backfield of Derrick Henry, Kenyon Drake, and Alvin Kamara.
Oh, yes.
And Alvin Kamara, he transferred out. But I mean, but they've had. But the thing is, just with numbers, normally it's a matter of it'll be Mark Rogers goes to the University of Alabama. He'll put in at least 3 years. If by the 3rd year he hasn't hit the ground running, then transfer out. But as far as Georgia's concerned, I can't for the like of me. But I will add this one caveat as far as at the conclusion of this season, Mark, the doggone quarterback room at Georgia cup overflowing. And by that being the case, if there's not attrition in the Georgia quarterback room after this season, then Georgia will never deal with it, Mark. Because if you look at the resumes of the guys that are on their bench now, Carson Beck, Gunnar Stockton is coming in, Brock Vandegrift, and then as far as JT Daniels. And yet they're still sitting behind, as we all know, the best DUI lawyer in the state of Georgia, Stetson Bennett IV. Something's wrong, Mark, if those 4 guys stay with the University of Georgia after this season.
Yeah, I would put any amount of money practically on that. More than one of them will transfer there's no way that quarterback room is going to stay that stocked going into next season. But even your example of Alvin Kamara, while he's turned out to be a superstar, my point was that productive players who are starting and producing are not leaving those schools, but they're leaving other schools. Like you brought up Eric Gray from Tennessee, Wanye Morris from Tennessee. Those guys were producing. Tyson Chandler left Tennessee. There are certain schools across the country. Zach Evans just left TCU. He was their starting running back. He's a stud. He's playing. I don't know why he's leaving. And not everyone needs to have a football reason why they're leaving, but I'm seeing players who are prominent players leaving the school.
Yes. And once again, Mark, you're trying to, when it comes to this, think with a rational mind. And when it comes to certain young men in certain programs, it will make you lose your mind. But I wanted to, and imparting a comparison contrast for a moment, and that is your buck nuts and my tide. Just in the respect of, I'm gonna do mine first, and I'm gonna ask you to close it out. And that is, when it comes to the University of Alabama, did I expect them to lose any regular season game? The only regular season game that I thought honestly was going to be tough would have been the A&M game, but I still didn't expect to lose that game. But the one thing I would say as far as with this particular Tide team, they didn't have the young talent on the field in the beginning. It was more so as in inexperienced players on the field. And the younger players came to the fore once that bugaboo, as far as the injury bugaboo, came about. So right now, Mark, as far as with this particular team, it's house money, because I really didn't expect to even be in this situation, although I didn't expect them to lose a game. But as far as the class that will be sophomores next year as well as juniors, really I was more so expecting 2 out of the next 4 years winning championships. And right now, if they get it this year with as far as all the aces, all the kings, and all the queens in their hand, it's a possibility, Mark, they can win 3 out of 4. And my question to you, Mark, is this: what surprised you about the Bucknuts? Because my biggest thing is, I really didn't expect you all to lose as far as regular season, Mark. But I defer to you.
Well, before I answer the Ohio State portion of that, it's remarkable what Nick Saban is able to do. And on one hand, he needs to get all the credit. On the other hand, of course, he's one guy out of a football program of 100, so he can't do it alone. But he puts everyone in position and evaluates them correctly to be able to do their job. So he's a master at acquiring the right people, whether they be coaches or players. And then I'm sure that the amount of instruction and attention he gives to player A is completely different than player B. And he's able to gauge their maturity level, their skill level, and say, okay, Devontae Smith, you roll, you do your thing, we'll see you at practice, versus, the backup center that needs, instruction here and there. And he's not doing well in this class. So-and-so take care of that. It's just the guy in pushing the right buttons is just almost one of a kind. And so the one thing that astounded me about that performance on Saturday night is not that they won, because that did not surprise me, but that their offensive line went from the performance that they had against Auburn, who has a very good defensive front, but it's still not as good as Georgia's. And they went from not being able to block Auburn, and to a certain extent LSU, and to a certain extent some other games during the season, but those two in particular, they looked bad on offense, and that started with the offensive line. And then they're like playing the best front in college football, and they look like an NFL offensive line a week later. That's I just don't know how that happens. But again, it's just not Nick Saban, but of course he's responsible and in control of all of it. So that's just astounding to me. In terms of Ohio State, The Oregon loss, we can pin on two things. Number one, they had a quarterback playing his second game of the season. And there are quarterbacks all over the country playing second games of their season, their freshman season. So he played well in that game, but he was not the quarterback that he would become 6 or 8 games later. So he made some crucial mistakes. He had the load of the offense thrown on his back, 54 pass attempts, too much, should have run the ball. We're not stopped running the ball. That's what drives me crazy sometimes. Ryan Day's a little bit too much of a passing happy, mad scientist in the lab working with passing formations and all of that. When he's got to realize that, hey, we're not being stopped running the ball. Let's lean on that a little bit more. And our defense is not up to the challenge here. So we can kill some clock and take some pressure off our freshman quarterback who's only played 1 game. So I think they kind of screwed that up on the offensive side in regards to, I can't argue with the productivity. It was over 600 yards of total offense, but it was red zone mistakes. And then the defensive side, Kevin, if you would rewatch the Oregon game and the Michigan game and watch the Ohio State defense, they were as pathetic against the run in both of those games, but in very different ways. Against Oregon, they were out of position. The scheme was horrible. The linebackers were constantly filling the wrong gaps, being duped. There wasn't an Ohio State would-be tackler in the screen on the TV screen half the time. Like Oregon out-schemed them. They out-coached them. And you just had running backs just running an open field. The difference between that performance and then they went to the lab, and that's when they pulled the play calling duties away from Kerry Combs and gave those to Matthew Barnes, and they got progressively better throughout the season. It looked like they were prepared for Michigan. Against Michigan, they didn't miss assignments. Their coverage wasn't getting burned. They were in position to make tackles and break up passes, and their run defense wasn't out of position. Michigan was not blowing open or tricking them in any way. They just got physically beat up. Just the sledgehammer came at them over and over and over. And they just physically were not man enough to play that Michigan run game.
Wow. And Mark, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this question, and this will be my last question, and that is in reference to Mr. William Anderson Jr. And I'm not going to take away from Peter to give the Paul, but I must ask you, shouldn't he have at least been invited to New York next weekend? Because if you look at his stats dwarf the gentleman both the Bosa's, as well as Chase Young, and Ndamukong Suh, etc. And do you feel that if he would have been invited, that he would have took any votes away from Bryce Young? Because I don't feel that he would have. But I defer to you. What's your opinion on that, Mark?
Well, I understand your point about comparing his numbers to some previous great defensive players, but obviously he's being compared and either chosen or not chosen based on the comparison between the players that are playing in 2021. So there was another defensive end, as you know, Aiden Hutchinson, who was invited to New York City. We know that there are tons of great players across America. When I say great, whatever adjective you want to place on it, great, good, exceptional, whatever. And so it's never, in a sense, going to be enough. And maybe somebody who's more of a expert on the Heisman Trophy selection process in regards to who goes to the ceremony, I know that there's a maximum and there's a minimum. Like I know that I think they invite at least 3, but no more than 5, something like that. So it's always 3, 4, or 5. And so it would be Hutchinson, Young, Pickett, and
Stroud.
Stroud. So there you go. 4. If I'm getting that right, they're inviting 4. So I believe they could have invited him. So here's where I'm going to plead. I don't want to call it ignorance. But in regards to, okay, so we can look at the stat sheet. And I saw Alabama play plenty of times this year to know how good Will Anderson is. Saw all the significant games, Florida, LSU, Arkansas, etc., on down the line. And same thing with Aiden Hutchinson. Saw all the big games. Now you can look at their stat line. If you look at the stat line, Will Anderson should be the player in New York City. Had more sacks, more tackles for loss. I almost jumped off my couch last weekend watching the SEC championship game when they showed his tackles for loss stat line. I didn't realize. I was like, this guy's got over 30 tackles for. You never see that number. 30 tackles for loss. I think he's at 32 tackles for loss. I'm like, holy mackerel. So if you're just looking at stats, then he gets the nod over Hutchinson. But I would have to do, if I was a Heisman voter, I would do a deep dive to do my position justice and not just mail in a ballot like I'm sure a lot of those people do. And I do a deep dive on, okay, who was making the plays in the bigger games against the better opponents? Because as you well know, some guys get 10 sacks and they had 4 sacks against William and Mary in week 1. And then they had 3 sacks against, Charleston Southern in week 3. And that was 7 out of their 10 sacks. And other guys are performing against, the Georgias and Tennessees and LSU's on the schedule. So I would, and I don't know what the case is there. I would want to see that in particular to see who performed against the better teams. And then my last point would be, this is not a knock against Will Anderson because he has no control over this. But I think it's pretty easy to see that Aiden Hutchinson is more integral to Michigan's success, more necessary. They're not there without him. Will Anderson, great player, top of the line, all that. But Alabama has more reinforcements for him than Michigan does.
Interesting, Mark. Interesting. As always, a pleasure to speak with you. Congrats again on 10 million. And hey, hopefully, this time next year you'll be at a bare minimum 20 million.
There you go.
But as always, a pleasure to speak with you. Hey, look forward to talk with you soon.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Appreciate that. All right. Always insightful questions from Kevin. And if Kevin's listening right now, he reminded me in something that he asked that once we get to the off season, and this is something that he digs into at times and brings up, we'll do an exhaustive ranking of all the programs, or at least the major programs in college football. We'll come up with some kind of rating metric, wins and winning percentage and national championships and conference championships and all that kind of stuff. We'll put something together and we'll have a big, I'll produce a video, and then we'll have a big live get together and we can all debate on my all-time college football program rankings. We'll do that. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
It's Minnesota Dave.
Oh, Minnesota Dave. Back to being Minnesota Dave this week.
Yep.
Okay.
Back to being
Good.
Minnesota Dave this week. Congratulations, by the way.
I appreciate that.
And my question for you is talking about Big Ten conference realignment.
Ooh, I love this topic too. I was going to hit on this at some point myself. Go right ahead.
And I was thinking, we tried the whole entire legends versus leaders. Nobody liked that. No one likes the way the West and the East are, because the West is basically, if you win the West, you're just the big fish in the little pond. And, it's been unfair. I feel that the divisions need to be realigned, and this is how I would realign them. I would say Northwest versus Southeast. And in the Southeast, we would have Ohio State, Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers, Indiana, Purdue, and Illinois.
Okay.
In the North, you would have Michigan, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and Northwestern. And we would have to basically have some way that Ohio State and Michigan play each other every year, in Northwestern and Illinois play each other every year. But they might not have to play at the end of the year, because you don't want to get into that whole entire thing where they're playing back to back. You know, if they end up winning, let's say Michigan ends up winning the Northwest, and Ohio State ends up winning the Southeast, and you just don't want them to have it like near the end of the year where they played each other, and then they go to the championship game and they have to play each other again. And I would rather have that be in the middle of the season, like around Halloween, or like the week before, like the midweek October game, or like a Halloween type end of the month Halloween type game, and have Penn State play Ohio State at the end of the year, and have Michigan State play Michigan at the end of the year, instead of Ohio State playing Michigan at the end of the year. And no one really totally cares about Illinois and Northwestern, except if you're in Illinois. But just want to know what you think about that.
Well, I think that you've come across some good points here. So just to backtrack, Legends Leaders did not work. People were confused. It crossed the geography all over the place, and people just didn't get it. I didn't get it. Not that there was anything to get. It was just that they just basically divided two divisions, or the conference, into two divisions to try to keep the balance of power. But geographically, people need to have some kind of concept of what that the divisions mean something. So you've addressed that. So you've addressed the power imbalance, which I'll address in a second. But you've still kept the geographic integrity. So that's great. So kudos there. That makes a whole lot of sense. I really have no issue with that. Geographically, it makes total sense, and it's understandable. I'm not crazy about the division names, but those are geographic names. So I guess it's no worse than East and West or North and South, but that's what they are. So all that makes sense. Okay. I don't think that there would be any issue with designating certain cross-division games that have to be played every year, as you just mentioned, those 3 games, because what the ACC and what the ACC and the SEC do, I think, are totally stupid, and they designate everyone to have a cross-division rival. You don't need to do that. If that particular school does not have a cross-division rival, just don't give them one. They don't all have to have cross-division rivals. So in the SEC, they think that everyone has to have a cross-division rival, and some of them make absolutely no sense. Texas A&M and South Carolina are not rivals. They do not need to play every year. Just match up the teams that have to be matched up, as you mentioned: Ohio State, Michigan, Illinois, Northwestern, and what was the other one you?
That was it.
Okay, just those 2. So just have them. You can just do that. They already do that with Indiana and Purdue. They're in opposite divisions and they play every year, so they already do that. So you're all set there.
Yeah.
The only thing I don't like about this is I don't like, and I don't have a real good reason for it. I just don't like it as a traditionalist. I do not like those games coming off of the last weekend of the season. And I would keep them there.
Games the last.
I would keep Ohio State, Michigan the last game of the season.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from. I just don't like the idea of having it like let's just say,
well, I don't like it either.
It comes off more like it comes off as an exhibition game. That's the feeling. That's the feeling. It'd be like a precursor to the championship game. That's my feeling about it. And it's hard. And it's hard to beat the same team twice. All right.
But think of it this way.
That's
Here's a few ways to look at it. Number one, if you would go through the years, that game would come up a lot less than you would anticipate that it would. Now, we might be heading toward an era in which it would, possibly, but that game would be played a lot less than you would think it would be played twice in a row. Number one. Number two, this would almost never happen as well. Far less that both of those teams would have their division championship locked up at the end of the season. So it would be an extremely important game. Rarely does a team, go through the Big Ten year to year and go through each division and count the number of times in which the team that won the division championship had the division championship locked up entering the final week of the season. It almost never happens. So that would be a meaningful
it happened
game.
Once. I think it happened once with like Northwestern, and I think in 2018, well, they locked it up. I think like the second or
they went 8-1. Yeah, but it almost never happens. So that would still be a meaningful game to the standings. I would run the risk of Ohio State and Michigan playing twice in a row. I don't want to see them play in October.
You would run the risk on that.
I don't want to see them play in the middle of October.
I mean, all right, I understand that. I understand the tradition aspect of it. That's the big thing. But the only reason why I brought it up like that is just I like the idea of them not playing back to back.
Oh, I understand.
And I would rather have them play each other sometime in like October, like the way Texas and Oklahoma play, in like around that same time.
Yeah, so, I'm trying to think when that's happened. I know that it has, but it's been pretty rare that teams have played back to back. Yeah. So anyway, it's a good proposal. The other thing that I'll say is that while there's a perceived imbalance between the two divisions, it's more of a top-heavy situation in the East. And even basically up until this year, it's more of an Ohio State problem than a Big Ten Eastern Division or Western Division problem. It's basically nobody can beat Ohio State. That's what it's been. So Ohio State goes to the championship game and beats the West. So they did that 5 out of 7 years. So actually, if you look at the games played between the two divisions and you add up the games during the regular season, they're almost 500. There's not a big imbalance between the two divisions.
Oh,
overall.
Yeah. It's not like Rutgers and freaking Maryland have winning records against the Western teams at all. So
yeah, the East has the really good teams and the really bad teams, and the West has more marginal teams, top to bottom.
Yeah, they're more equal teams. We've been talking about it for now for years, and I understand where people have the perceived look of, the East always wins. The East always wins. Well, if it's always Ohio State, and Ohio State's been this dominant for years, of course they're going to look like the East always wins. Hello?
Yeah,
Oh, I thought you.
absolutely.
I thought you.
I think that's what I already said.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
But nothing else. Have a good day, man.
Hey, I appreciate the call.
Congratulations again.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
All right.
All right. Let's keep it going here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
This is Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, what's going on?
I wanted to talk to you about Texas and the fact that Texas is pursuing Quinn Ewers quite heavily right now, and he's going in for a visit this weekend. And there's been a fight apparently with Texas Tech and Texas and all of that. And I was wondering what you think of that. Why you think that he would want to go to Tech or instead of Texas? They're both programs that aren't in great straits, but I don't know. What's your opinion on that at the moment?
Well, I don't know why he would want to go to Texas Tech. Based on his original decision to go to Ohio State, it seems as though he wants to play at a power program at the top of the line. So Texas is a different form of that. Obviously, they're not succeeding on the field, but when it comes to money and resources and name brand and all those things, Texas is another version of Ohio State, just in Texas. But of course, they're not winning at Ohio State's level. So I understand your question, but Texas and Texas Tech are on two different levels. So I would understand him. Again, if I'm reading into the situation based on his original decision, I could understand why he would go to Texas, but not to Texas Tech. If I were him, again, reading his approach to all this, I would be looking at the best possible programs that I could find that need a quarterback, or where there would be the least resistance to gaining the quarterback job, because you're not going to go anywhere that's really a worthwhile program and not have any competition. That just doesn't exist. If you want to do that, go to Fresno State or somewhere. And anybody who likes Jake Haener, I'm not saying that he's not a good quarterback, because he is, but you know what I mean. Just, you're going to go somewhere. You're going to go replace Brendan Armstrong at Virginia, where you can get an automatic. But if you want to go play for conference championships and have some attention and prepare yourself for the NFL, then you're going to go somewhere like Texas.
Yeah. I also thought about it in terms of NIL, because apparently there was Texas Tech. He was maybe trying to use them as leverage to get more NIL deals from Texas, and it's not. They can negotiate with the transfer portal players. They can't do it with recruits because of the way the law is structured. So allegedly, they're already working NIL deals to try and persuade them, I guess. I don't know if that's in the books there, but that's kind of something that was brought up in the media. And also, I was wondering what you were thinking of Sark's first year, and what do you think a reasonable expectation for year two is?
Well, my reasonable expectations for Steve Sarkisian at Texas for year two would be much higher had they had a decent year one. Like if you would have asked me this question 3 months ago and said, okay, depending on what you expect this year, what do you expect in year two? I would have told you that they should be an 8-4 football team in year one, and then they should be seriously contending for a conference championship in year two. But now we're sitting after a 5-7 season, in which the first few of those losses, they played extremely well in the first half and then folded. And then after that, it just got progressively worse. So my expectation for Steve Sarkisian this next season would be that they're that they're in contention to play in the conference championship game, that they are in the 8-4 range. They're in the 6-3 range in conference. And even if they don't make the conference title game, that they're in the mix the final couple weekends of the season.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable there. I got to see what you do in the off season here. Man, I think 8-4 is definitely the floor. I think that I would want to see. For the Longhorns, at the highest, I would like to see a conference championship fight, but we'll see. Now, I was wondering what you thought about I don't know if you've heard about the Texas NIL news for the program and the backlash it's taking from around the country from other fan bases, I suppose, thinking that it's cheating, I suppose. I don't know if you heard about it or not.
I did not.
Oh?
Yes.
Oh.
My response was I did not.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear you. All right. Well, then that's all.
Well, I appreciate the call. Have a good night.
No problem. All right.
All right. We would like to get some sponsors in here. So please let me know if you have connection to a sponsor, whether you own a business you would like to sponsor here at the Voice of College Football, or you are connected to a business that would benefit from the number of views that we bring and subscribers and so forth here at the Voice of College Football. And that could be to promote all the way across the board in regards to all of our content, or if you are connected to a particular area of the country or town or state where you would say, hey, I want to promote, I want to be a sponsor for your Florida State coverage, your Georgia coverage, your Nebraska coverage, whatever it might be, please hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. MarkRogersTV at Gmail to sponsor. Who's on the line? Welcome in.
Hey, Mark, this is Landon calling from Houston, buddy. Thanks for taking the call, and congratulations on the 10 million, bud.
Thank you, Landon. Appreciate that. What's going on?
Yeah. I'm sorry I'm coming in a little bit late, so if you've already talked about this, I apologize ahead of time. But as someone who, loves the game as it is, as your channel shows, and has been a bit of historian of the game, I'm on the side of, I really despise the idea of playoff expansion. I've never really seen a year where it looks like the 8th or 9th ranked team ought to even have a chance to play for a national championship. And I was just wondering if, first of all, what your general thoughts are on that. And second, if you thought if the group of 5 just had their own 4-team playoff and national championship, if that would, be better than just expanding things to, 8 or 12 or, wherever the discussions are.
So the reason you don't want expansion is solely because you don't think any other teams beyond those 4 would be competitive.
Yeah, I've, as much as I've looked at history of the game, there's never been a year that I can think of. And again, we're not talking possibility. Those are 2 philosophical concepts. Sure. You try to avoid is certainty and possibility. You're talking probability. And yeah, quite frankly, there's just never been a year where a team that's been in that, 7, 8, 9-ish range has what I would consider earned. And especially if you get down to 11, 12, 13, that I think has, what I would say either earned or qualified the right to be considered a national champion in the game of college football. I also think the committee never got it wrong in any year. Now, maybe in the seeding, there could be a little, but as far as the 4 teams they've picked every year, I've been pretty convinced the data has backed all the decisions that they've made. every year that they've had the playoff, and I've never seen a need to get more than that. Here's the thing that's never happened, Mark, is, at least in the modern era, I actually own every national championship game on DVD since 1980. And best of my knowledge, since 1975, which I would consider kind of the real year when national championships were a little more solidified in the sense that you actually had to win your bowl game. Really, before that, you either didn't have to play a bowl at all, or you could lose your bowl game and still get a national championship from one of the two major polls. I think since that time, we have never, ever had 5 undefeated Power 5, undefeated teams at the end of the year. That's just simply never happened. And so until that ever happens, and I just don't think it would, there's really no need to expand it. I think the onus is on the teams. If you want to make the playoff, win your game. If you lose a game or something to that nature, and you have to leave it up to a committee and the metrics and numbers and computers and whatever, I think that's a you problem. So that's why I don't really think the committee has ever got it wrong. And I've never been convinced that there's ever been a year where you can say, yeah, this 12th ranked team really should have had an opportunity to play for a national championship.
So you don't think that if we went through the history of college football, and you've gone pretty far back, but you're right in my wheelhouse, 1980, that if we went year to year, that I would not be able to come up with solid arguments for teams outside the top 4 that had just as good a resumes as teams in the top 4?
Well, I do know 1983, the Miami Hurricanes were the 5th ranked team in the country and ended up getting the national championship because of their upset of Nebraska. And I understand the 1984 season is somewhat laughable. The fact that BYU could get a national championship and not beat a single ranked opponent all year. I'm not saying that there aren't, certain, marks or whatever against that. But yeah, I think you would have a really difficult time getting past, like 5 or 6, maybe. And that's like a maybe, to sort of validate, especially, let me rephrase it this way, especially in what we would say a tournament format, meaning this number 18 to be expected to win 3 games in a row against top 8 opponents, right? Especially in that format. So it's one thing to say in a one-off game, sure, in one game, the Hurricanes could beat Nebraska. And they did, sure enough, they did. But you wonder, would they be able to win 3 of those kind of games? It'd be tough to say. But I think in general, the onus is on you to schedule tough throughout the regular season to earn it and basically win the game that's in front of you. Don't leave it up to numbers and committees. And I think the more exclusive it is, the more value it has. And, you make it more difficult so that every game continues. And that's what we love about college football. The regular season has the most meaning. And I think at this level, and I'm sure, Phil Steele has had this in his magazine for, almost 2 decades now for a 4 team. And even he kind of backs up. You don't ever really need more than 4. There's never really been a year. And if you happen to find a year where you're like, man, this number 18 just really got robbed. Okay. I mean, that's a pretty rare one-off thing. So yeah, like I said, I think the committee got it right every year for the most part. And I've not really thought, or, I just don't really think there's ever been a year that there's been a number 8 or especially a 12 or 13 team, honestly.
So in a situation in which we have a sport where everybody goes out and schedules their own non-conference games. So they're scheduling 3 to 4 out of 12 games.
Correct.
You don't have an issue with, so basically you've made the statement that you're okay with a committee. First of all, you're okay with there being 13 people that basically have complete power over the sport. You're okay with them selecting?
I think because of what the representative body is now, if they were all 13 people from the Big Ten exclusively, I'd have a problem with it. But the fact that they represent a sample size from all the major conferences, and like I said, I think so far because they haven't got it wrong in my mind, I really don't have a problem with it if they're well informed and they go through the process that they go to and they represent kind of a variety within the football culture. In reality, no. I think the more voices you add to it, the more you muddy the water and the more confusing it could actually become, in a sense. So
you don't think that there are objective ways to, first of all, deal with scheduling? Because scheduling is paramount in trying to determine who the best teams are, because we need to evaluate the teams, whether that be by people or by computers or by just objective measures like it's the NFL, let's say. The schedule's everything. And so first and foremost, the schedule's screwed up in college football. The scheduling is beyond ridiculous that teams are making their own schedules. Where does this happen anywhere else? Where teams make their own schedules. So you've got too much of a disparity of schedules. That's first and foremost my issue with the whole process. And I know I'm getting away from the playoff, but this sets up the playoff. The scheduling is paramount.
No, you're right.
So I would actually have a committee, and I've outlined this in videos. For as much as I'm against committees, this committee would be effective because they would have very, very strict parameters in forming everyone's schedule. Everyone would play a 500 composite non-conference schedule. The next thing is that let's take just last season. I think that it sounds like you and I and pretty much anybody who has two eyeballs are okay with Alabama winning a national championship and that they were the best team, that they showed in the playoff that they were the best team. However,
I have no qualms with that. But I think last year is incredibly difficult because the game sample sizes were so diverse because of COVID. Last year is an incredibly difficult example to work with. So I don't know what point you're getting to necessarily in illustrating last season, but last season is really, really tough. That's why at the end of the day, for them to put in Notre Dame the way that they did instead of say a Texas A&M or something, because of what last year was, they could have went either way with that and it wouldn't have bothered me. I don't think it would have mattered which one of those two teams they put in.
Well,
so
that's the problem. It doesn't matter to you, but it matters to those teams.
Certainly.
Texas A&M and Oklahoma got excluded.
Yeah.
So my claim for Texas A&M would be they basically had the same record as Notre Dame with possibly a tougher schedule. And my claim for Oklahoma would be, why do we play conferences? And Oklahoma won a conference. Notre Dame did not. So we've got Cincinnati, who magically is okay to play in a playoff this year as an undefeated team. But last year they were undefeated and they weren't even close to being selected for the playoff. So the inconsistencies, and much of my criticism of the committee isn't a criticism of them. It's a criticism of the format and the process. It's impossible to slam 130 teams into 4 spots and make it fair. Just go back a season or two prior to that in 2018. Why does Oklahoma make the playoff and Ohio State does not make the playoff? So there's a perfect example.
Ohio State had 2 losses that year.
No.
Ohio State had 2 losses.
No, they did not. Ohio State had 1 loss. Oklahoma had 1 loss in 2018. They both won a conference.
Oh, that was when Ohio State had the bad loss that year,
yes,
and neither had
bad loss.
That was the bad loss against Purdue, I think, and Oklahoma did not have.
So there you go, bad loss, whatever that is. So That's where we have a problem. When you have the Big Ten champion with one loss, that if you flip the metrics and don't look at the bad loss as much as you look at the good wins, had better wins than Oklahoma. And I know the committee had to make a decision. I'm not criticizing their decision. I'm criticizing the format. Why is the Big Ten champion with one loss, a 12-1 football team, left out of any ability to play for a national championship? That's ridiculous.
Well, that year, and very specifically, how I could defend the committee, and I understand your point, it matters to what team they left out. I felt like they could have either went with Notre Dame, which they did, who had 12 data points, or they could have went with Ohio State at 12-1, who had that 13th data point. Both teams won 12 games. We don't know if Notre Dame would have lost the 13th game because they didn't play one. And that year particularly, they could have selected Notre Dame or Ohio State, either one, in my mind. And it could have been a correct answer. The fact that they took the undefeated Irish that year over and against Ohio State because of, a bad loss, their defense was showing, it's as though that was, if you remember, that was Shiano's worst defensive year. I think they gave up over 400 yards, a game that year. So they weren't as convincing as, say, 16, right? Ohio State doesn't win their conference, but they got in, and I think they deserved it in 16. I think they did. They had good wins. That win at Oklahoma that year was an impressive non-conference road victory. It's all about road victories because it's hard to win on the road. And their only loss was at Penn State in a blizzard by 3 points. And just because of how the Big Ten is structured, Penn State had 2 losses. They didn't deserve to go. Ohio State did. They got it right that year.
But that's your definition of deserving, though. With all due respect, and you're extremely knowledgeable, and I appreciate the phone call, and it's a great conversation, and you make a lot of great points. That's your definition of deserving. I could take the other angle and say Ohio State deserved it over Oklahoma and Notre Dame because of X, Y, and Z. That's my definition of deserving. We could go to 2017, and I could say, why did Ohio State not make the playoff that year? Your response would be they lost 2 games. And I'd say, well, yes, they lost 2 games, but they won arguably the best or the second best conference in America. So they won a conference. Alabama did not win a conference. Why are they in a playoff? If you can't win a conference championship, why should you be in a playoff? 2016, I could flip it around and say, why was Ohio State in the playoff? Penn State beat them head to head. Penn State won the Big Ten championship. Why are they left out? You understand there's an issue.
Because they got stomped out. Yeah, because they lost because they had a bad loss to Pitt and they got gutted by Michigan.
Well, I know why you're answering. I know why, but the question I'm making is, why does that matter? It matters it depends on each person's perspective on it and who they root for and who they're touting. And I would like to get away from that situation and get to a more objective process where at least we are honoring conference championships.
But Mark, all conferences ain't created equal, buddy. You can never
absolutely they're not.
Never.
I have no issue with that. At least they're going to win a conference championship. Then why don't we just eliminate them and say, don't play football anymore, Pac-12. We're not letting you in. I don't get that.
I don't think right. I don't think anybody would take that opinion. I think the rest of the college football world is looking to the Pac-12 and saying, give us a team that deserves to be in, that has proven that they can belong. Oregon had set a trajectory to do that. They had arguably the best victory, I would say, until Alabama beat Georgia last week. They had the best victory in college football this year, no question. Road wins are incredibly difficult in college, and that was a very impressive road victory. So they had set themselves on a path, even with one loss, that they were headed straight for the playoff. Well, what happened? Utah, a 3-loss team, stomped them out twice. Okay, they don't deserve to be. Obviously, the Pac-12 can't produce a team that deserves to be in.
Okay.
It's not a matter of, any kind of bias. Again, history as well as anybody, Mark. Do you really think a 3-loss team ought to win a national title under any circumstance?
Well, I don't think what I think should matter. Well, that's where I'm trying to get us to an objective process where what I think doesn't matter. So 2015.
So how would you? Yeah.
I'm taking this year by year, and I'm coming up with arguments against a 14 playoff every year. So 2015, and I only bring up 2015 because you just stated a number of, you put wins and losses into a context of how poorly the game was played or how well the game was played. In 2015, Michigan earned a spot over Ohio State in the playoff, correct? They won the conference. They beat them head to head. And they won the conference.
You mean Michigan State?
Yes,
you mean Michigan State?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. That was the game where they win like 14-12. They held Ohio State to 120 yards.
Yes.
That was Urban Meyer's lowest offensive output ever. Yeah, I remember that game. Yeah.
Kicked a field goal, last play of the game, 17-14. Yeah, they win. Okay.
17-14. That's right. Yes,
so
sir. I got you.
So Michigan State earned a playoff spot, but college football people clearly see that Ohio State's a better team. And if we're going to put it into some of the context that you're saying in evaluating wins and losses, Michigan State lost to a 5-7 Nebraska team. They were handed a game against Michigan where the punter threw the ball up in the air. I don't know if you remember that debacle. The Michigan State game of 2015. So I'm just evaluating play on the field and saying Michigan State didn't win that game. Michigan gave them the punter basically handed the guy the football and said, "Go run for a touchdown to beat us."
Yeah.
So if we took all that into context, we'd say Michigan State, sorry, you won the Big Ten championship game, you beat Ohio State, but you're not as good as them, and you lucked into a division championship and a conference championship, so you're not going. Do we take it to that degree?
Well, honestly, buddy, I don't think it's an either or proposition. I think each year it's a cumulative effect of several data points. I don't think you can boil it down to, okay, one answer fits every situation perfectly because of the nature of the game, because of the nature of, as you're pointing out, scheduling, rosters matter. When you play teams, what did you have back-to-back road games? So I unfortunately, I think because you only have a 12-game, 13-game sample size, you have to take in all data points. And in certain years, certain things are going to rise above others. There is no like one universal set thing that elevates no matter what. This is it flat out, because I just don't think such a thing could exist in the way that college football is played. So in that 2015 year, as an example, because that was such an impressive win on the road, if you're Ohio State, you just can't lose that game at home, right? Like you just can't do that. And unfortunately, would you say, well, that cost them the play? Yeah, that year it did. But the next year, it didn't because of other factors.
Sure.
Because there were other factors that were taken into play.
Nothing's within a vacuum, certainly. But when you're defending your position in regards to the selections that were made, you keep using the term deserving, and I get that. From your perspective, it was deserving, but from somebody else's perspective, it may not be deserving. I would like to get us to a place of objective criteria. Boom. They go to the playoff because objective criteria states they go to the playoff. The NFL's standings determine these teams make the playoffs. They earned the right to go to the playoff. I don't know who's earning the right to go to the playoff now.
Well, but here's a problem. Here's a problem, Mark, and I know that you would agree with this. You had last year, and what was it, about 10 years ago, you literally had teams in the NFL with losing records making the playoffs. The NFL does not have a better system than college football. When you can have a losing record and actually have an opportunity to win the Super Bowl, that's terrible. Just because you won your division, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's better. Now, I think where your point is very well taken is a sense of controlled scheduling. I don't think you have to schedule games 10 years in advance the way that they claim you do. I think you can schedule games on a year-to-year basis. So, for example, if you wanted to set up cross-conference, non-conference games more regularly. So let's say the Big 10 and Big 12 decided to jump in bed and say, hey, we want to play each other next year. We want to set up a bunch of games, right? Well, does it really matter if Ohio State plays Texas Tech? Like, what is that going to prove? You know, if Oklahoma plays Rutgers, what is that going to prove? So how do you control that the better teams are still playing each other in a cross-conference setup? Like this year, Oregon playing Ohio State. And I don't know when they scheduled that, but obviously it worked out this year. You know, some years, Washington against Michigan actually could prove something, right? Like typically Washington's one of the better teams, and a lot of preseason had Washington ranked higher than what they ended up. So they obviously ended up being a disappointment. But both schools at least looked like they gave an effort to schedule something tough non-conference. This is where I do agree with your point, is without some kind of controlled cross-conference to get a gauge on where the conferences are, I think it is incredibly difficult. I'm not saying it's easy, but because of that, and let's get rid of the group of five for just say, let's just take the 65 Power 5 teams, right? That's the 64 Power 5 schools plus Notre Dame. Let's just work with those 65. Even to schedule them in a 12-game framework or 13 to get down to, let's say, 4 is incredibly difficult. I don't think it's necessarily impossible. And like I said, I just think the committee's done a really good job. And they, for the most part, you know, again, the way that the metrics and the numbers and stuff have shaken out, they've never really got it grossly wrong in any of the years. And now I see your point, like, well, there's counter arguments to X, Y, and Z. Yeah, there could be. I don't think they're quite as strong as, you know, the teams that actually that made it in. And again, I think overall, we're really ranking over the top 4, 5, maybe 6 teams, right? Like, I still don't think we've even pulled, you know, a number 9 or especially a number 13, 12th ranked team that says, man, they really should have got in. They really proved their worth and should have got in. And I just think the watering down of what a national champ, I mean, you know, again, you have a 3-loss Utah team that could win a national title just because they won their conference.
Don't give.
That's as bad as them.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, buddy.
Don't give the committee too much credit in this fact, in this way. You or I could look at the college football, having watched a complete college football season, at the end of the season on championship Saturday night, after all the games are complete, look at the standings and select 4 college football playoff teams in about 5 minutes, and would have come up with almost the same results that they did. And we would have just needed to make that determination between Notre Dame and Texas A&M in 20 and Ohio State and Oklahoma in 18, and just those.
Sure.
And so that they haven't done some phenomenal job. They basically made it like, I always hate the comment that's made constantly by some people that say, with 3 weeks left in the season, for example, it'll just work itself out. Don't worry, it'll work itself out. Well, no, it's not working itself out. Yeah, there will be a decision made. That doesn't mean it worked itself out. If I've got a stack of credit card bills that I'm not paying, will it work itself out? Yeah. If I sit here and never pay them and I don't have the money, yeah, I'm going to get hauled off to jail. It worked itself out. There was a conclusion. Yes. So just one more. So I'll just make 2 counterpoints to some statements you just made. And for folks out there, this is what I enjoy. So I'm not right all the time, nor do I claim to be flawless in my thinking in any such way. These are the type of conversations I love because there are certainly different ways to look at this. In 2011, Wisconsin went 10-2. This was before the first Big Ten championship game. So they won 11-2. No one was saying anything stating Wisconsin should be playing in a national championship game. But to the point of non-conference scheduling, they lost on a Hail Mary against Ohio State. They lost on a Hail Mary to Michigan State. So 2 teams in their own conference were the only 2 teams to prove that on a last play of the game, they could beat Wisconsin. Nobody outside the conference showed or had the opportunity to show that they could beat Wisconsin. So why would that team not be a qualified team to play in a national championship tournament?
In that particular year, if it was a 4-team setup, that was Oklahoma State only had one loss. They lost at Iowa State on a Friday night. That's what kept them from the national title game. And that's how we had LSU, Alabama repeat, which I think most people acknowledge those were the two best teams in college football. I think I heard one commentator say when those two teams played, I think there was something like 60 NFL players were on the field at one time on that game. So in that particular year, could there have been, and I got to be honest, Mark, I can't remember what else was in the air. I feel like Oregon would have only had, maybe one loss that year or something.
Yes.
But that goes to the nature of, okay, would it have been LSU, Alabama, Oregon, and Oklahoma State? And should they have left Wisconsin out? I think given those circumstances, I would say, yeah, even though they only lost by a Hail Mary, that 2011 year, that was the Luke Fickell probation year for Ohio State. They were 6-6, man. You can't lose that game. I'm sorry, you just can't. So they did it to themselves. Don't leave it up to the committee. Handle your business. If you don't handle your business, then you leave it up to the metrics and eyeballs and votes and stuff like that. That's on them.
This is what I find
Wisconsin
interesting about the point that you're making right now, and it's not an uncommon point, that for those teams that are on the proverbial bubble of the playoff entry, if they lose a bad game, then that's the death knell. That's the black mark against a team.
It can be. It certainly can be. That's right. I think so.
But if that same team would have won and lost the same amount of games, where let's say an 11-1 or 12-1 team, but their loss came against a really good team instead of the bad team, well, that's just displacing the game that they did win against the really good team where they lost against a lesser team. Do you follow they have one less quality win because they lost to that team, but we focus on the bad loss.
Well, not having their entire schedule committed to memory that year. And I would have to compare them to Oklahoma State and Oregon that year to see, okay, what was your quality victories? Did you have good quality road victories? Did you have a bad loss at home? This is where other data points start kind of pouring in. And maybe, I'm not saying there's not a universe where an 11-2 record is actually superior to another 12-1 record. I'm not saying that at all. There could be a particular season where a schedule is set up in such a way that a team that goes 11-2 is at those 11 wins are far better than any 12 wins another team has. And those two losses were really close, really viable, whatever the case may be. They're not bad. They're less than a touchdown. They're against ranked opponents. They're on the road, whatever. And the other team that goes 12-1, that one loss could have been by 4 touchdowns at home to a sub 500 team. Okay, there's room for that. It just hasn't happened. There just hasn't been that season, at least in the playoff era, to make that argument to put that team above another team. That's why I say for the most part, they've kind of got it right in that regard. Well, now, I am going to fully endorse your point in, more adequate controlled scheduling. I don't think that every Power 5 team should just play 12, just super tough Power 5, because I understand the dynamics of the game. I know what finances are involved, and I'm sure individuals, and I've had buddies that played for smaller schools. So let's just take the Ohio State example since you're a fan. I get why Ohio State plays Akron and Miami and Toledo. It keeps the money in state. For those young men that play for Toledo, hey, they get to play in the horseshoe, and that's a big deal for them. I get that. I give every team at least 2 games a year to schedule those kind of games, because you need a little bit of time off. We can't forget these are college students. They can only practice 20 hours a week. They got exams. They have to use team physicians. It ain't like the NFL where you have a personal physician to help keep you healthy. This is team. If there's 12 other guys hurt, you got to stand in line. It's a completely different dynamic. We got to take it easy on these fellas to a certain extent. So I don't have a problem with that. But if you have at least 10 legitimate, solid games, you got some cross-conference interaction, I do think that there are adequate metrics. Again, I don't think there's going to be one set objective thing that, you played this many games and you won this conference, therefore you're automatic qualifier. I just don't think such a thing could exist in the world of college football with a 12-game schedule. You know, the NFL only has 32 teams. That's a little bit easier to funnel down in a 16 games. And again, these are grown men. This is their occupation. They do it 70 hours a week, you know, on and on and on. These are young men that are college students. They have other things. It's just a different setup, man. And I know it can be frustrating. I know that there's years that are frustrating. If you're a fan of a team and you felt like you got gypped, you're always going to feel like you got gypped. You know, talk to an 04 Auburn fan. To this day, they're going to feel like they got gypped not playing for a national title.
Sure.
And I get it.
I get it. The last point I'll make is I just want to see every conference represented. And that's my counter to anyone who says, well, you can make it 12 teams and the 13th team's going to complain. You could make it 16 and the 17th team's going to complain. You could make it
That's
64 and the 64. No, not with a valid argument, because you would have every conference represented, and your response to anyone who complains would be win your conference. You didn't win your conference. You had the opportunity. Right now, you would have to admit this. Tell me one thing that any team in the country can do to guarantee that they will make the playoff, and I will tell you that does not exist. That criteria does not exist.
I would say if they're Power 5 and they win every single game, they will get in.
No, they won't.
If they're Power 5.
We don't know that. If every Power 5 conference champion goes undefeated, one of them is going to get left out. So there is nothing that we can tell a team to do to guarantee that they will make the playoffs. It doesn't exist.
Right. But we know that that's never happened. We've never had 5 undefeated Power 5 conference champions. So we're always, and let me ask you this real quick, Mark, and I'm sorry for taking up so much time, buddy, but real quick. So you just want every conference represented. In your mind, that's more valuable than just getting the best teams. So what if the 4 best teams happen to be in one conference?
I want first of all, none of us are God, so we don't know who the 4 best teams are. So that amuses me as well, that people claim to know who. I've never claimed to know who the 4 best teams are. People ask me and I'll say, I'll tell you who I think they are. I don't know who they are.
Sure.
They haven't played.
Sure.
No, in that case, I want the best teams, and I also want all the conferences represented. I want both, and you can have both.
Okay.
That's what I would like. So thanks so much for the call.
Thank you for the interaction.
Absolutely.
Man.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right, buddy. Yep.
I would love to know how many people are on the line right now, because I don't want anyone who is called for me to cut them off and end the show. Because I know that there's definitely 2 people on the line, and it might be 3. So I definitely want to take whatever calls are left. So if it's just these 2 that have been waiting patiently, I appreciate it. And I'll just take these 2 calls then. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
To the man that gives college football its voice, Mark Rogers. Hi, and how are you, sir?
Hey, David. I'm good. How are you?
Good. I wanted to delve into the playoff debate. I also wanted to touch on the coaches here for a second, if I could. I wanted to ask you. I again am a proponent of an 18 playoff, and I think your justification about the conference champions, as you mentioned, has always been the biggest thing that an 18 playoff would rectify. As I say, I think that for those people that always wanted to see a Power 5, get a chance. Well, obviously this year you've got it with Cincinnati, but I think that this is obviously a rarity. But that's why I always made the case of the 18 playoff, because you could accommodate the 5 conference champions, and you could still get a Power 5 team in there. And I think in a lot of normal years, the 7 and 8 teams could be solid teams. I mean, obviously, it would have benefited Ohio State this year if there was an 18 playoff, of course. So, I mean, I'm still a proponent of that and think that that's the answer.
Yeah,
I think we're still in agreement, right, Mark?
I would be great with that.
I wanted to, although I will make a point. The former caller had said, about Utah being a 3-loss champion and winning it and deserving of winning a national championship. I would say this: if Utah were to make the playoffs, they would be what, the 5th seed, or would they be the 6th seed, maybe?
Something like that. Yeah. Depending
okay.
on how we see
What I
them,
was-
I don't know.
What I was going to say was, imagine the gauntlet that they would have, the 3 games that they would have to win in an 18 playoff to win a national championship.
Exactly.
So yes, they may.
Thank you, David.
So that yes, they may be a 3-loss champion, but to the caller, if they're a 3-loss champion that goes through beating Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia to win a national championship, or Michigan, Alabama, and Georgia, let's say, to win a national championship, that's a pretty deserved gauntlet to go and win your national championship.
Thank you.
Whether you got 3 losses or 0 losses.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll add one point to the point that you just made. So the point that you just made is the point I've been making for years. Yes, if you are supposedly the 8th best team in the country and people say they don't deserve to be given a shot for a national championship, are you kidding me? If you go and beat 3 of the 7 best teams in the country consecutively, you didn't earn a national championship. You may have earned a national championship more than anything we've ever seen in the history of college football. Number one.
Sure.
Number two, to another point, I believe you will agree with, USC in 2016 would be a prime example of this. The team that we see in December may be considerably different than the team that was playing in September. And while all the games need to count, we would be honoring those teams that turned into much better teams in December, a la USC, who the voters voted number 3 in the country, even though they missed the playoff and beat the conference champion by 2 touchdowns, who made the playoff, Washington. And we would be able to still value the entire season, because you've got to have a certain record and conference championship to get there, but would not banish them to obscurity based on a poor start to their season.
Well, see, and here's the other thing too, Mark, that I'm going to put out there. First of all, I'll make a couple of other points in reference to this. In most years, and it's interesting to go back and take a look at it. Number one, I think that we can both agree that, let's say we took conference champions over the last, let's say, 20, 25 years. I guarantee you we're not seeing a high percentage of 3-loss conference champions in the Power 5 over probably the last 20 to 25 years. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Low percentage.
I would say that it is a fairly low percentage of a conference champion in the Power 5 winning a conference with 3 losses or more. Does it happen? Yes, it has happened. Does it happen a lot? Not even close to happening a lot. So I would put that point out there. And to the other point that I would make, and I think this is where you're going with this, Colin Cowherd, Joel Klatt were talking about this, and I think they were right about it. They said one of the biggest things that's happening with college football right now, and I think we could both agree on this, is college football right now more than any other time, is more regionalized than ever to just a certain couple areas of the country. Is that basically it?
True.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And I think that that's the other argument for expansion, is that if you can expand, if you can get, a West Coast team out there, if you can get other parts in the country more involved in the playoff, I think that would do more to help, it'd be a little less regionalized. Do you see that as also part of the issue that we're having, and maybe the case for the 18 playoff? I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I don't really factor that in, but I think it's valid and I think it's important. It's not something that I've really focused on, but I think it's all valid and it's for the good of the sport. And what is the worst thing that could happen in including a Utah who theoretically would be one of the 8 teams selected or one of the 5 conference champions, when in actuality, if we could have God come down and tell us exactly who the best team is, and all the way through 130, that Utah is actually the 11th best team in the country. They're not the 8th best team in the country. They're the 11th best team in the country that won the Pac-12. But they won a conference championship, and they earned, based on the system, they earned a way into the playoff. And, we're not talking about allowing the 40th best team in the country into the playoff. They and this may bolster the Pac-12 to become a better league. And sure, they may show up and lose 38-10, 41-17 for a few years, but
Sure.
I guess, and as soon as I mention this ugly 3-letter word, some people are going to go crazy because they misrepresent, or I miscommunicate where I'm going with this. But in terms of the NFL format of honoring champions that win divisions and conferences, regardless of, well, the AFC West may not be real good this year, but do everybody go crazy and say, well, we're not going to let their champion in the playoff?
Right. Yeah, I mean, because last year the football team, they're still the Redskins
Yes.
to me, by the way. I'm sorry. By
I'm
the way,
with you.
get a name. If you want to drop the name, but at least get a name.
Or
I'll
maybe,
just-
David, I'm sorry to
what's
cut
that?
you off,
Go
and
ahead.
we shouldn't keep going down this path. Let's not offend anyone, and everybody just be the football team, the Cleveland football team, the Detroit football team, the Dallas football team. We could go that route. We
Sure.
don't want to offend any Lions or Tigers, Seahawks. Maybe we just
Hey,
be the football teams. Okay, go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
Peter would be out there with the pitchforks, and it would be bad. Yes, I was just going to say though. I mean, the divisions are what the divisions are. I mean, just because the division was bad that year, I mean, does not mean. I mean, and as I say, again, back to the 3-loss conference champions. Those are outlier years. I mean, that's a very much a rarity too. I mean, I remember you had that Seattle team. I think that one year, I think also went 7-9, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken.
Yep.
That's the only other divisional champion I can think of. But one other thing I wanted to throw out, Joel Klatt's name was mentioned earlier. He had another really good solution, and other than the expansion of the 8 to the 18 playoff, the one other thing that I think college football can do to improve things, and this is why I think the Big 12 may be right, although as a fan of the best rivalry in college football, this could help to create a rematch. But are you out there as an advocate of eliminating the divisions in college football, Mark, or what are your thoughts on that?
It doesn't bother me having divisions, but I understand the argument against it. I totally understand
Okay.
because of the imbalance of certain conferences. I understand that. It doesn't bother me. I don't think it's that egregious. If we would address the conference scheduling, that would help to align things a little bit better, in my opinion. But I'm not one of the advocates of tearing up divisions. I think it would be, in some sense, a little bit difficult for the average college football fan to track a 14-team conference. But I'm not opposed to that. I get it. I understand it. It makes sense that we don't want the 5th best team in the Big Ten playing the best team in the Big Ten in a championship game.
Right, because I mean we know how slanted. I mean the Big Ten is. The three of the dominant programs in the conference are all on one side, and now you got Michigan State starting to come on again with Mel Tucker as their coach. So I mean the competitive balance has really been on that side of the division. At the very least in the SEC, at least you've got kind of the two major powers now separated. With Georgia and Alabama. Although Alabama's division clearly. I think, well, with Florida, who knows? I think there's no doubt Alabama's division, the stronger with LSU and Texas A&M and those folks. So, I mean, that's what I was thinking, that maybe the Big 12 just has it right because they just do the two best teams. But, as an Ohio State fan, I don't know if I necessarily want to go against tradition, although this year I maybe wouldn't mind.
For sure.
But I wanted to touch on the coaches real quick, Mark. Oh, by the way, what was your thought on the Venable hires at Oklahoma? Did you think that they were going to go there, or I guess it was in the works, but I don't know what your thoughts on him. I mean, he's been a really good defensive coordinator, but
I think two factors played into their decision. and it's understandable that they had a hotshot coach who moved on, who, although he had mentored under Bob Stoops to a certain degree, didn't have any strong ties to the program. So he's the type guy that's going to go after the most money and the best job. And there's nothing wrong with that. Brent Venables, it took just about everything to get him out of Clemson. He's a guy that if he goes to Oklahoma, he's not going to be leaving to go anywhere. If he if his tenure ends at Oklahoma, it's going to be because they decided it, not him. So I think they wanted that stability. And of course, he has ties to the program. And so he's established kind of two homes in college football, Clemson and 13 years at Oklahoma. So he has strong ties there. The other thing would be, I think they were looking for discipline. They were looking for toughness, discipline. The program's become a little soft. Not necessarily, those are my words, but hearing from Oklahoma fans, media, etc., that they think that the program's soft.
Yeah, it would have been interesting if you could have merged Lincoln Riley and Brent Venables on the same staff together. Then I think Oklahoma would have really gotten it right. It's interesting to go from an offensive guy, now they go to the defensive side of the ball. I know they're heading to the SEC, so I guess, you know, it had a lot to do with him having coached there before, though, too, and having those ties. But I think that's probably a big part of it. I didn't get a chance to listen to your discussion earlier with your Oregon, with the guy that you had on
Yep.
from Oregon. Is he leaning towards Chip Kelly as being the candidate there, or does he have somebody else that they like?
He brought up some people that are just being talked about in the media. Other people like Justin Wilcox at Cal, Dave Aranda, of course. And you know what the deal is. Once there's a hot shot commodity, they get thrown out there for every job. And Dave Aranda has become that guy this season. But there weren't a whole lot of other names besides, and ESPN has its sources, which are stating that Chip Kelly is negotiating with Oregon, that it's close.
It would be interesting to see how that works again. I mean, he obviously got them go. Although, you know what, though? Mike Bellotti had pretty good success there before Kelly got there, if I'm not mistaken, right, Mark?
Sure.
I mean, I know he had that one really good year with Joey Harrington, but obviously I think Chip took it to a higher level, you know, got them close to winning a national championship in 2010 and, you know, kind of left the program in good shape for Helfrich, who got him in a national championship game. So are you still surprised, by the way, that Matt Campbell is still out there, by the way? I thought that, you know, he was the high commodity.
Well, I right before we started our live stream here, I had a conversation with Iowa State guy and recorded that. And I pretty much asked him the same thing. I said, if there's been one name that has been prominent in every job opening the last 2 or 3 years, it's been Matt Campbell. But every job opening has started with his name and Fickle and Franklin as well this offseason. And then it quickly moves and narrows to what the real candidate pool looks like. And he's never in that next wave of conversations, it appears. And so I asked that. I said, is there something that he's doing wrong in the interview process or in the conversation process, or is he really not that interested? Anytime you ask those questions, there really is no answer unless you know the man and know his motivations for why he's making the decisions that he is. So I don't know that, but I do find it somewhat interesting that he's apparently elected to stay put for now.
Yeah, it's interesting how he was just such the hot hire at the beginning of the year. You know, I mean, you were buying him, Mark. You had him picked to win the Big 12 this year. So, although you weren't the only one, though. I think there were a lot of people that liked Iowa State to win the Big 12 this year. So.
Well, I'll put it this way. I went out there a little bit on a limb, not a huge limb, but they were pretty much the second pick or the 2 seed. And I picked Oklahoma to be the best team in the conference during the regular season and Iowa State to pull off the upset in the championship game. But for all those people that picked Oklahoma as the obvious choice, well, none of us were right. So,
yeah. About as good as that Spencer Rattler pick for Heisman this year, right, Mark?
yes.
I don't think that would work out well for anybody. All right. Well, as always, a pleasure. Congratulations on the views, Mark, and continue to keep up the good work.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. 2 more calls. Let's get to these. Appreciate you waiting. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
What is going on, man? This is Michigan Man. Can you hear me okay, Mark?
I got you. Loud and clear, Michigan Man.
All right. Well, I wanted to ask you about the Georgia Michigan game. I won't keep you for too long. I know it's getting late, but I wanted to just kind of, and I want your input on this. I've been listening to a lot of the callers talk about the playoffs, and I just wanted to give my personal thought on it because I think mine may be different than everybody else's. You know, I don't watch a lot of NFL football, and like I said, I want your opinion too, if you don't mind. But I don't watch a lot of NFL football, and the reason is I prefer college football for a variety of reasons. To me, it's just better. Everything about it's better, and it seems like already a lot of the things that we've got, like the NIL, and like I'll say, for example, like Quinn Ewers went to Ohio State. He went to Ohio State and made $1 million off the NIL deal. Quinn Ewers is now in the transfer portal. Since he's gotten to Ohio State, there's been a lot of people that he's been rumbling. There's been a lot of rumors about him leaving, not being happy there. And I'm inclined to believe that there's a good possibility that he just went to Ohio State to make $1 million and he's gone now. And we're seeing a lot more of I think we're going to see a lot more of those things because of NIL. There's going to be a lot more money hunting, which isn't a bad thing. The transfer portal has made it to where you can switch teams just within the snap of a finger. The only thing left to make college football the NFL junior would be to expand the playoffs. And I know I'm going to get lit up by half the comment section, and I've been just reading the comments because I like to see other people's opinions, and even the people that are in favor of expansion all have different ideas. Some want 8, some want 6, some want 12. We're going to end up ruining a good thing, in my opinion, which is college football, because we're trying to make it so democratic to make everybody happy that it's just going to ruin it, in my opinion. You know, like I said, I'm a Michigan fan. I'm also an over-the-road truck driver, and I'm in Ohio more than probably anywhere else. And I'm always wearing my Michigan hat, my Michigan shirt. And I get people say stuff to me wherever I go in a friendly way 90% of the time. You know, Buckeye fans, I meet them everywhere. Hardcore. I got cornered in Lima, Ohio yesterday by 2 women at the shipping office, Buckeye fans. I mean, it's you know, there's fans everywhere, and they're passionate about it. You know, NFL doesn't have, I don't think their fan base is nearly as big as a lot of college fan bases. And I understand there's a lot of teams. But I think a lot of the reason why people like myself prefer the college over the NFL is because in the NFL, sometimes it's a situation where you've got overcompensated players that are playing more for themselves rather than playing for the team. They're all in it for themselves. There's no loyalty to the team. They switch around back and forth. You can't get excited about anybody staying at one team because they switch around. You can have a situation where you can have a 5-loss team make it to the playoffs. That's just boring to me. Like, there's nothing interesting about that when almost everybody gets in. And I see college making a lot of college football. They're making a lot of decisions that are starting to mirror the NFL. And there's a lot of people that watch college football because they don't like the NFL. And I just feel like we're trying so hard to make everybody happy. You know, and like I said, me being a Michigan fan, this is the first time my team's made the playoffs in God knows how long, since, 97? Well, it wasn't even the playoffs. Like, it was just the BCS back then, if I'm not mistaken. I'm only 30. But I still didn't want, even when they weren't making the playoffs, I still didn't want an expansion. Because it's going, you start doling it down to where it's easier and easier to get in. You're still going to, if you do it like a top 10 expansion, you're still going to have your Michigan State, your Oklahoma States that are 12 or 13 that thought they should have been in. There's still going to be a controversy. It's never going to be a situation where everybody's happy. We're going to just end up ruining college football because we're going to expand it, and it's just going to mirror the NFL, in my opinion. Would you agree with that, or are you kind of on the opposite end? I'm not even sure your stance on expansion really is. Are you in favor of expanding?
Yes. Yes. So here's my stance. First and foremost, is college football better than the NFL? Is NFL better than college football? Depends on your perspective. So there is one thing that we know, and that's the quality of play is higher in the NFL. That can't be debated. Obviously, the football's better. That doesn't mean it's better to watch. That depends on the person watching. But the players are better, obviously. The only other thing that we know about the NFL versus college football, and it sounds like this is running contrary to what your thought is that the NFL is much more popular than college football.
You think the NFL is more
I
popular
don't
than college
think
football?
so. I know so. So there's no comparison between how many people watch college football and how many people watch the NFL. It's not even comparable. Pull up TV
Do you have the
ratings.
numbers on that? 'Cause I don't.
Pull up TV ratings, the NFL and college football. The NFL is by far the most popular sport in America, and it's not even close.
That's news to me.
That's
and I'm
because you're
not
watching
doubting it at
college
all. Like
football.
I don't.
And that's fine.
Well, sure, but
That's all
like
you
when
care about. So you're not now in terms of the passion. When you said something about NFL fans are not as passionate as college fans, that's who knows. I would agree with you. I would tend to agree with you, but that's certainly not a fact. I know NFL fans that are just as passionate as college football fans. So
Well, I do.
that's not a fact.
But
It's
what I'm
just
saying,
a perception. But there's no question that the NFL is
No.
much more popular than college football. Gets much higher TV
Can I say
ratings. Yes, sir.
well, can I say this though? You also have college football is, like I said, and this was kind of what I was talking to earlier. When I go around Ohio, go around anywhere, you know, I always get heckled at for my Michigan shirt, which is fine. You could wear. I mean, I'm also a Detroit Lions fan, but I don't really watch it. I mean, I watch maybe one or two games, you know, obviously because they're not that good. But I can't really bring myself to watch a lot of NFL. You can wear a Detroit Lions hat to Illinois, Green Bay. Nobody cares. I've done it before. It's not the same. And you know, if the NFL, if the ratings are better, you also, in my opinion, you have to take into accountability. There's a lot of people that just watch it to watch it. You know, you have a lot of celebrities that just get into it, that go to the Super Bowl, that don't really care anything
I think we
about
have a
it.
pretty
They're just there
small
to be there.
percentage of celebrities in this country. I don't think they're making up like millions of people involved. No, I get your point. I don't mean to joke about it, but I'm just letting you know by any type of measurement when it comes to television ratings, there will be more people that will watch the first round of the NFL playoffs than will watch the college football national championship game.
Oh yeah, well I watch the Super Bowl. I mean, people that don't care.
No, I'm not talking about the Super Bowl,
not
the Super Bowl. The first round, the wild card round of the playoffs. More people watch those games than watch the national championship game in college football.
Okay. I mean, I believe you. I'm not doubting that. I mean, you know, the playoffs are playoffs. The NFL is a cultural thing. A lot of people watch it to watch it. You know, it's just my personal opinion. But I mean, if it's not really that I'm having an argument on which one's better, the NFL or college. What I'm saying is if we expand college football, in my opinion, like I said, there are a lot of people that watch college football because it's not the NFL, you know, and I just don't think turning it into the NFL is, you know, and I'll say another thing, and I know the Lions are not that good anyway, but on any given Sunday, you could tune in and watch the Lions in Detroit, and a lot of times they don't even have a packed house. I mean, they may occasionally, and they seat, 70-something thousand people. You can go to Michigan, and they've got a packed house, and they seat like 105,000 every week. I mean, there's the fan base in general. I mean, NFL's got their crazy fans. I'm not doubting that. And I will default to where, I mean, I know you just know more about sports than I do, so I'm not going to argue your point because I know you just know more about this than I do. I've never, to me, the college, it's just always been bigger from what I've seen. Now, obviously, the ratings are, I guess, what counts. But I just don't think expanding it, you know, I know it's going to make a lot of people happy because there's going to be more teams that get in, but you're just turning it into the NFL junior, in my opinion. It's the NFL without it being the NFL. We've already got a situation where players are leaving on a dime. Players are making big money decisions based on money. There's no the camaraderie is going to end up dying in a couple years because of NIL. We're already seeing, it's just a lot of things. I don't think it's a good idea personally.
Okay. But I'm failing to. So I get your point in regards to numbers. If you look at the NFL, 16 teams or 12 teams out of 32 make the playoffs. College football, it's 4 out of 130. So I get the just in terms of sheer how many teams enter the playoffs. It is becoming more like the NFL playoffs. But other than just the numbers, why do we have to restrict playoffs to 4 teams out of 130? What makes that unlike the NFL or like the NFL? Why don't we just not be like the NFL at all and just get rid of the playoffs? Because just having playoffs in and of itself is like the NFL in that way. So why don't we get rid of the playoffs?
And I understand that, but I guess my thought is the main reason I think is because we have 130 teams, but we don't have 130 elite teams. You've got 28 NFL. They're all elite by some standard. They're NFL players. But, arguing that Houston should be able to make the playoffs, I mean, there's a lot of teams that just aren't good enough to be in the playoffs in the first place. It's hard to take 130 teams into accountability on the same level. If you're good enough to be in, you'll find your way in. Cincinnati did, and I don't think they should be in the playoffs. But my point is, too, you've also got things like the Peach Bowl, the Citrus Bowl, and like I said, I'm only 30 years old, but it seems like back in the day, that stuff used to matter more. When Bo Schembechler was coaching at Michigan, I think he made the championship game maybe once, like in the 70s, maybe a couple times. But 99% of the time, he was just going to bowl games, and that was good enough back then. But it seems like now, teams just aren't happy doing those kinds of things. If they're not in the playoffs, they're just not happy.
There was no championship game prior to 1998. So he never played in a championship game because that did not exist.
Well, see, like I said, I was 7.
There were just bowl games.
But I saw back in
prior to 1998, there were just bowl games, and Michigan, for example, would win the Big Ten Conference and would go to the Rose Bowl, and they would just play a Pac-12 champion, Pac-10 champion at the time, and then there was a vote on who won the national championship. So there was no championship game. That did not exist.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't really, as far as like the 70s and 80s, like I said, I know his bowl record. I mean, he won 5 out of 20. His bowl record wasn't that good. But, my point is really, I mean, it just seemed like that used to matter more back then. Nowadays, it just seems like it's just all about the playoffs. I mean, personally, if Michigan didn't make the playoffs and if Michigan just made the Citrus Bowl, I would want them to make the playoffs. But I wouldn't be saying, damn, excuse my language. I wouldn't be saying, dang, I wish they could have. They need to expand it because I'm just not happy with the Citrus Bowl. I mean, every team can't make the playoffs. And if we expand it to 10 teams, there's still going to be people fighting because people are going to say, well, my team should have been in. They're 12. And it's never going to be a solved system. It's going to just get to the point to where it's just going to ruin it,
okay.
And I like the fact that there's 4 teams because it makes the matches more interesting.
So
a loss.
I understand your point, but I'm going to make a statement that will clarify why, at least for me, I will not argue about, that this team should have made it instead of that team based on that they're number 11 instead of number 10. This is the reason that argument can cease. Because right now, we're in a place with this playoff, if that's what you want to call it. It's an invitational where there is nothing a college football team can do to guarantee that they will make the playoffs. That criteria does not exist. We cannot tell any team in America, this is what you need to do to make the playoff, because we have people selecting a playoff. We don't have criteria. The criteria changes based on the week and the teams involved. There is no set criteria in college football on how you can make the playoffs. That list does not exist anywhere. So that's a problem.
Right. Yeah.
And number two, I want all the conferences to be represented. And that's what would stop the arguing or the complaints from certain teams. As long as their conference is represented, all you have to do once they complain about being left out is say, you had the opportunity to win your conference. If you would have won your conference, you would have made the playoffs. That's my response to people saying, though, if we expand the playoff, there's always going to be a team left out that's going to complain. No, there won't, because if all the conferences are represented, then the response can simply be win your conference and you will be in the playoffs. Now we can't tell anyone how to make the playoffs. How do you make the playoffs? Can you answer that question? What do you need to do to make the playoffs?
Well, and ultimately, it's just up to the committee. You just have to win big and win big games and hope that you play games
and
that
hope.
matter. But
that was you nailed it right there. You have to hope. Where does this exist anywhere else? I don't know.
Well, and
I never took a job and said, I hope you pay me. I'm going to do this work this week. And you set out this criteria, but it's kind of vague, but I'm going to meet that criteria as best I can, as best I understand it, even though it changes every day. And by the end of the week, I'm hoping you're going to pay me. I hope I've earned it, but I don't know.
Sure. But, honestly, though, and I'm not trying to sound ignorant about it, but because what you propose, the conference, win your conference, that's probable. But there's still going to be people that aren't going to be happy with that because, say, like Georgia and Alabama played. I felt like Georgia had a really, really easy schedule, and it showed when they played Alabama. They got patty slapped. But just say that it was a conference championship situation, so now Georgia's out of it. They're out, and Michigan is now ahead. Georgia fans are going to be screaming all over the place saying, hey, we're still better than Michigan. We're still better than Cincinnati. They're still going to,
wait a minute.
There's going to be this.
I didn't say that those teams would be eliminated. I said that the conference champions would be all included.
Oh, okay. I don't know, man. I mean, I guess either way it goes, I mean, something's going to happen. There's going to be some kind of an expansion because there's enough people wanting it. There's a lot of people that don't want it too. And like I said, I understand your point of it too. There's, the bowl committee comes in and there's a lot of people that don't trust them. Like I said, I agreed. And it's not just because I'm a Michigan fan with the whole Michigan State thing when we were bumped ahead of them and everybody was saying that was ridiculous. And then Michigan State blew 2 games and it kind of became obvious then when people were saying, well, I guess it makes sense now. And, people weren't really complaining about it. I have a little bit of faith in the committee, but I will say it does make it a lot more competitive. When it's a situation, like the NFL where half of them get in just about, it just, to me, it's just boring, but I know that's the X's and O's, it's just to each his own kind of a situation. The only other thing I wanted to ask you about, Mark, and I know it's late, I don't want to keep it too long, but this Michigan-Georgia game matchup, you may have already touched on it because I came in kind of late, but what do you think coming into this game? It looks like most of the analysts and even people in Vegas right now are still giving Georgia the edge. Do you think it's earned that they kind of have the edge over Michigan? Because to me, like I said, we could argue about games played, but to me, they've had a really, really easy schedule. And people are saying, well, their last 2 games, they blew out their last 2 regular season games. They blew out teams by 50 points. Well, it was Charleston Southern and Georgia Tech. And then they played Alabama and got blew out the water. I don't think I'm really, and it may just be my fan bias, but I'm predicting Michigan to win potentially big. I think they're a versatile team. I think Georgia's, I think they have a good defense, a really good defense, but they clearly don't do well with the up tempo. Alabama kept running the up tempo on them, and their defense got tired. Jordan Davis started giving up in the middle of plays. Michigan just seems to be kind of a well-rounded team, and Georgia has a pretty good. I mean, you could say elite defense, but I think offensively they're just maybe good at best. I definitely would give the edge to Michigan, but I'm trying to. Do you think it's just my fandom, or do you see where I'm coming from at all?
Oh, absolutely. I think you make some really valid points. I do think on the surface that most people believe that Georgia's schedule was somewhat soft. Yeah, I think that their division wasn't as good as most people projected it to be. Florida wasn't anywhere near as good as they were supposed to be, and Missouri in particular. But they play a very deep schedule. Like they didn't play any elite teams. The two best teams that they beat were Clemson and Arkansas and Kentucky. So they beat Clemson, Arkansas, and Kentucky. If you compare that to Ohio State, Iowa, and Penn State, if those are the three best teams that Michigan played, I would put Wisconsin in there. So I would say that Michigan beat four really good teams in Ohio State, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Iowa. When I say they're all really good teams to varying degrees, of course. So I do think that Michigan's schedule, off the top of my head, was more difficult. But nobody in the country dominated like Georgia did. They did not play after week one, did not play a difficult game. And they played some capable teams. Tennessee's a decent team. Arkansas is a really good team. Kentucky's a really good team. Clemson's a really good team. Those three teams in particular are definitely all top 15 to 20 teams in the country. Okay, now when you get to the matchups, I think you make some good points. I think these teams are very similar. They can look at each other in the mirror, and they're pretty similar teams. They want to run first. They have NFL offensive lines. They have strong running games. Georgia more so with multiple backs. And what you pointed out about Jordan Davis, who's a dominant player, but he just got worn out in the second half of that game against Alabama. So, I'm sure Jim Harbaugh and others, Josh Gaddis, are taking notice of that.
Yeah, and that's what I think. And like I said, it may just be my fan bias, but I mean, I'm predicting Michigan to win, potentially win big, just because we have so many weapons on offense. And like I said, if we can do that up tempo and we can keep the defense worn out and we can crack the code and we can score on the defense, our defense is good enough to take care of their offense. But that's one thing that I wish they would clear up is SEC bias, honestly, because it does seem like they always give the SEC team the edge regardless of the situation. Because Georgia did have an easy schedule. I'm convinced, Mark, that Ohio State could play Vanderbilt unbeaten, and Vanderbilt could have lost their last 10 out of 12 games, and they'd give Vanderbilt the edge by 3 points just because Vanderbilt's the SEC team. But anyway, I'll let you go, buddy. I appreciate you taking my call. Have a good night, and congratulations on your 10 million viewers.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. All right. I believe we have come to the bitter end here at the Voice of College Football. Let me read this super chat. Rocky Top. Should have my glasses here. Loving the Miami hires. All right. Excited about the future. Congrats on the 10 million views. Go Army, beat Navy. All right. Army vet here. Thank you so much for your service. We appreciate that. And to everyone watching and or listening right now who is serving or is served in our great military, thank you so much for your service. And yes, Army and Navy on Saturday. I'll be back here sometime tomorrow, most likely. If not, we'll be back here on Saturday to take your calls on college football. And keep it locked in here at the Voice of College Football. Tons of content coming your way, breaking down all the bowl games and the playoffs. And maybe I'll look at the Heisman Trophy. Maybe we'll do that. Maybe during the off season, I will let you know which Heisman trophies were messed up, which ones they got wrong. And Big Ten realignment. I'll have to attack that one of these days as well. But I like the caller's idea about the Northwest and the Southeast. That he worked that out extremely well. Appreciate everybody being here. You guys are the ones that make all this go right here at the Voice of College Football. If you've got a sponsor for us, you can always hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. MarkRogersTV at Gmail, looking for a sponsor or 10. And we will see everyone soon, whether that's tomorrow or Saturday. Keep it locked in here for videos posted all the time. See you soon.